Good evening, everybody. It is time for some midweek geek, and I'm joined from the off tonight by the familiar face of Elfbait. Good evening, Elfbait.
Hello.
And the familiar puppet of Mage's Musing. Hello, Merle. How are we?
Hello, hello.
Oh, it's not Merle then, is it?
No, it's just me, just the man behind the puppet.
The man behind the puppet. Sean, otherwise known as Mage's Musings. And in chat at the moment, Doofs loitering. Halakar is there as well. Brian's about, and Grumpy Old Slan is with us too, and K5K as well. So, good evening. How are we all? I did notice that a new Mage's Musings video dropped yesterday. Hello, Gene. Hello, General Nut. Hello, Ian.
Yeah, it only took me a week to put together with all the technical problems I was having.
Yeah, you did mention that in the chat we had, but no, it was good. It's good to see. It's nice to see a bit of interaction between the puppets as well on a video. There were some good comedy moments in it. It livened up a cold afternoon in the shop.
There's always some fun bits too when you see the transition between puppet and interacting with physical stuff.
Yeah.
Even back in the Sesame Street and Muppets days, those were always kind of interesting little magical shots where you could clearly it was somebody with gloves.
Well, one day, because obviously I've got the gloves and the sleeves, but that's all they are, right? So one day I'm going to be in the middle of that. Somebody's going to knock at the door. I'm going to answer the door with these puppet sleeve and gloves, wearing my track pants and a white T-shirt, and people are like, "What the hell?"
It's like some little TikTok video that I caught the other day. Yes, I go to there because they have a pretty good D&D community. But this girl's walking around in her cosplay. She's like, when you think you're at home when you're cosplay and your dad shows up, she's like, turns the camera to herself. She's like,
yes. Well, not being someone who dresses up even when the cameras are switched off, it's not a problem for me.
Yeah, I'm scary enough in my normal clothes, anyways. So,
yes, yeah. Well, aren't we all at our ages? We're all a similar age on here, aren't we? I believe.
Yeah.
I think we're all within a year or two of each other.
Yeah. I'm 51, so
same.
Right, and I'm hitting 50 in March, so
you're a young whippersnapper.
I'm a whippersnapper. Still got a 4 at the front of my age.
Yes.
How many years that is in puppet years? But
I don't know. The puppet's going to wear out faster than I had hoped.
It's like 104 in puppet years.
Yeah, maybe he's aging rapidly.
And I know I have less hair on the top of my head than you two, but I am proud to say I've still never found a grey hair anywhere in my beard or in the tufts that appear on the side.
This has been going white since my 20s, which is not surprising. My dad had a full head of like cotton white hair and beard by the time he was 50.
Yeah, my father was the same.
Yeah, but I had a balding friend who used to get pissed because I would purposefully cut the hair off my head. My mohawk. He's just like, he's like, you're taking it for granted. I'm like, but it is granted. Nobody goes bald in my family.
The pandemic gave me the opportunity to try a new look, so I've got like long hair tied back and a beard, but normally I'm cut short, clean shaven.
My beard won't grow any longer than this. This is as long as it goes, and then it just stops.
My wife doesn't allow excess beard growth. I
think we've all got some of that too.
I get grumbled at if it becomes anything more than a tuft under my chin.
Yeah. Right, you're only allowed the 5 o'clock shadow then.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, I'm allowed about 5 or 6 days grace. And if it gets any longer than that, then it's time to get the trip around. Anyhow, we'll start as we always do with recent any games lately. I ran a game on. What did I run on? Oh yes. We ran some Call of Cthulhu on Saturday afternoon, and it went extremely well. Reign of Terror, the sort of the prequel to Horror on the Orient Express, set during the time of the French Revolution. And I'd run this for my my face-to-face group between sort of pandemic lockdowns, and our group sort of got broken up by changes in people's work schedules, whatever. And I never got to the end of it with them. But the adventure hadn't gone particularly brilliantly, because it's the sort of adventure where you've got to sort of play into the French feel, and you've got to play into the players have to sort of play into the fact that they are soldiers with a hierarchy. One player is a sergeant, the other players have to do as they're told, and you get some good interplay when that happens. And my old Friday night group, there were probably too many interruptions and just too much happiness to sit around drinking tea, eating takeaways, and no one really got into it so much. But I think on Saturday it was different. We had Gingerbeard, we had Slan, and we had Omanal. Just the 3 players. Could do with a couple more, but it seemed to work really, really well. And the feedback I got afterwards was excellent. So I think my opinion of the adventure has gone up a little, in that it can work in the right sort of setting.
It's amazing how some adventures don't present well, but when you play them, they play better than you think they will.
Well, I originally thought this one would play well. It didn't play so well for my face-to-face group, but then it's played very well online. But it's a different attention, a different feeling, a different focus. Yeah. So I think that's why. And then on Monday, I started running Treasure Hunt, first edition AD&D, starting at 0 level with no character classes, and 3 of the players had never played anything older than 5th edition before.
Culture shock.
Where are you finding these people who play earlier editions who are from the newer generation?
I'm suggesting it to them because they've played the way I run 5th edition, and they've played the way I run Call of Cthulhu 7th edition.
Yeah.
Well, most of them have anyway, and I know you're here, DK. You can join in a moment. But they know how I run games, so they sort of trusted me to run this game for them, and I think they want to try the old school games that I started with. So it's gone really well. It's cool. First session was excellent.
Thump 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 thump. Someone's
before I come
at the door. Thump 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 thump.
There is a DK knocking at the door. Yes, he has been sat there for a little while. Hello, DK.
Boo.
Boo indeed. Boo.
Well, you're here now, aren't you?
Yeah, that's true. I shan't complain.
You're not going grey yet, though, are you, DK? You're far too young. You missed all the chat about losing hair colour.
I've seen a few grey hairs every so often, but nothing too serious.
Fair enough. A few more people joining the chat. We've got Omanals around here, and Edor, and who else has said hello?
K5K.
Said hello to everybody.
K5K.
I've already said hello to K5K.
Oh,
did you? Okay.
Sweet.
Yeah. So Elfbait, have you played at all recently?
I had to call my Monday game off, and unfortunately, that's the only game I have going right now. But yeah, it was. I mean, it's not permanently. It's just that session. I was not feeling it. So
am I a bit loud? Shit. All right, one sec.
But we're at a point in the game where it's going to be another big push into a pretty sizable fight. So I'm like, I need to have my wits about me, and I can't be half tired, and keep it fun. So gives them another week. I did actually do something I haven't done. The session before that, I did something I haven't done in a while, and that's actually hand out XP for straight up role playing, because they engaged these 3 spectral priests they found in this old temple. Basically, they're not horrible monster ghosts. They've just literally been stuck there since the temple fell, kind of going through their routine. And the party just sat there and spent most of the entire session talking to these ghosts. So I'm like, all right, cool.
If they've diffused any threats and they've experienced the ghost, then yeah, of course they deserve some XP for that.
Yeah, I mean they talked to the ghosts. They got some inside information on the temple and the background of the temple, and why there's a big giant demon spider there. In addition to the minions of Orcus, and you know, figured it was worth a little. I mean, not a huge award. It's like 100 XP.
Yeah, it's worth something. And Sean, we're still waiting for your videos to drop on your review caps. And I know you couldn't make my Cthulhu game on Saturday because you had a session planned. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, we did our Night Below game. The final. They did the final session of the season, and a lot of went down. There's a big player shuffle now. The assassins made their move against the cleric of Mask. I don't know if you're up to date on the Night Below ones, but
yeah.
So there was some funny. Everybody was howling because it did as evil did. It devolved into this massive array of backstabbing. Everybody was laughing.
Alex.
But it was good. But yeah, there's a player shuffle. So like the one guest player, although now he was having so much fun, he's like, oh, maybe I'll just make it permanent. And the problem, he would probably be permanent as it is. The problem, he's got to drive an hour and a half to get to my place. So you can only do that. So often. But that's good. Just this afternoon I was working on catching up on the recaps. So I'm 2 behind for Night Below. So the one I'm hoping to get one up this weekend and then early next week to catch up because I want to take another break when Christmas comes. But it was a good game. It was again very amusing. One of the other guest players who's decided to make it permanent is he's new to role-playing games, and so when all the betrayals went down, he was just laughing his ass off. He's an actor, so he's there for the character work. So he's not the kind of player who cares that players are fighting each other. So yeah, a good time was had by all. That was a thing. And then I've got Old School Essentials, last one of the year, coming up on Friday.
Cool. I'm looking forward to seeing the review caps. Oh, so DK, have you managed to play any games recently? I know you've sort of put the game that you run for me and a few others sort of on hiatus a little bit, but
no, I'm hopefully going to sometime next year start up I'm going to run a Stonehell Amherst game next year with maybe some of you guys from Last Sun. Just take a break from Last Sun for a bit and run Stonehell, running with swords and wizardry as close to the rules as possible, with some concessions to to AD&D, to fill in the gaps, But as for playing my own games, just playing Lords of Olympus every so often and Night Shift, a kind of an urban fantasy. Basically, if you take the AD&D OSR stuff and make it into urban fantasy, it's odd. For the lack of gold for XP, but it still has the old XP requirements. It's pretty high. It's really weird.
Well, as long as you're having fun, that's what matters.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's just weird. Like urban fantasy wouldn't be my go-to, but it's fine. I have fun.
Yep.
I did forget to mention that I'm going to be actually getting a chance to be a player soon.
Excellent.
Here. The 28th, I'm going to join in on my brother's campaign.
Nice.
5th edition campaign, but I'm coming through. I'm joining the campaign with my utility wizard, the wizard with no offensive spells, and we'll see how they like that. So, is it everything in 5th edition, or is there like a set books that you can use? No, it's an open campaign.
Okay.
Which is fine, and which works perfectly well because he's doing Wild Beyond the Witchlight, so it's all Feywild crap anyways. So it's the more whimsical and weird part of the campaign has evidently featured one of the characters inciting a workers' revolution amongst a bunch of intelligent rodents. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, I picked up that Hellas book you recommended to me.
Oh yeah.
Getting it for Christmas. Can't wait. I also got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles by Eric Wujcik. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, the original Palladium one?
I think so, yeah. I don't know if it's the first or second.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness.
I think so. Yeah, I don't know if it's like the first edition printing or if it's the second because it didn't specify on Amazon. But
There's
I managed
not
to get
much
a
of a
pre-owned copy.
difference.
Yeah. But it's like it was like £50 sterling. So I was like, fuck
Yikes.
it. It looked.
Oh, wow.
Like I mean, considering that like Amber Diceless is like almost £100 sterling. It's like yeah. I was like, oh.
It takes me back. I played that as a kid. Some good times.
Speaking of picking up books, I mentioned it in the Discord, but thank you, Hungar, wherever you may be at the moment.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
There we go.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I did pick
Don't
up
worry
a fun
about it.
setting
Coughs
book.
and sniffles are going around at the moment. You might hear
Sorry about the
other
coughing
half
as
of
well.
the other half in the background. She's suffering again.
I picked up a
What were we
fun
saying?
supplement that's called the rainy city, I guess it is, or the raining city, and it's done as a travel guide for a gunpowder age fantasy setting stuck in this like weird creepy island city that's surrounded by mists, and it's got a very Dickensian vibe to it as opposed to your classic fantasy.
Right.
But it looks interesting. I'm thinking about running a campaign in that, combining it with some of the stuff from the Monster Blood Tattoo book series, as well as I don't know if you've caught Shadow and Bone at all, but both good examples of how you can have a fantasy setting and have guns and not have it break.
I'm hopefully in the future. One of my old Lion and Dragon players is thinking of running a Vlad Tepes game set in Dark Albion, and I hope this comes through because I really want to play that game. I've been wanting to play it since I got it. So,
right, Enio, I'm going to channel the inner Saxius because I know he's not here, and I might have to put a time when this goes on YouTube. I might have to put a timestamp on it to say at the point where we actually begin the topic. Yes, because tonight's topic is challenging your players. How the concept of challenging your players has changed over the years. What methods you use to challenge your players? How do you work out challenges? How do you keep challenges interesting? And how do you create challenges which really have no sort of set solutions, and when the players improvise a solution going with it, and that sort of thing. I think that's what we need to look at. And has anyone prepared anything?
I have not, even though I asked for bullet points.
You did. Yes.
I kind of come at this with by the seat of my pants, dude.
Right. Okay. I'll start. My general way of approaching a D&D type game. Well, let's sort of go back a bit through the history of challenging players. Going back to old school D&D, we had a very loose system of categorizing monster difficulty by their XP value, and I mean, nowadays, in 5th edition, there is a system whereby you work out how tough the monster is, and then assign an XP value. Whereas it was the other way around in AD&D, where you took various criteria to work out the XP value, and then the monsters were given a level based on that XP value. And that was assumed to be the rough level of a dungeon in which you would find said creatures. That's D&D in its most basic form. But as I ran mostly modules, I didn't really see that in evidence in modules, because if you look at a lot of first edition, first level adventures, you've got things like ogres, which came under 3rd or 4th level creatures typically based on their XP value. And the same with things like wights, but yet you'd often find them in first edition adventures as an extreme challenge, but they'd be in first edition adventures, and people didn't really follow that pattern. But what I remember doing, and what I still do, is, okay, I don't follow any strict structure when it comes to what monsters I will throw at somebody in a campaign, but I do have a general sort of eyeball of what I think might be suitable. And I do like to make the characters encounter something beyond their capabilities early on in a campaign to just remind the players that running away or not resorting to violence is a suitable thing to consider. It's something that should always be
Heresy.
It's something that should always be in their mind. But more important than following a formula for challenging the players is making things feel almost realistic in a sense of creating a lair or what creatures are likely to live side by side or have some sort of logic behind it. That is more important.
An ecology, basically.
Ecology, yes. And I just expect my players to adapt to it and play it according to their character level. But I think every DM does eyeball. I mean, for example, you're not going to open up the Demons and Devils pages and pick out Demogorgon or Pit Fiends or something like that when you've got a first level party. That's just plain common sense.
Wait till their second level.
But you can incorporate those entities in a way of, for example, you can have a low level priest of Demogorgon who's trying to set up a cult. And you can have that sort of bring them in that way. But that's my general approach, and I still do that to this day with more modern systems when I run them. The first time I ever ran my modified version of 5th edition for my current group, I did say to them, I run it in an old school manner, and there'll be times you have to run away. And all they were doing was raiding a very small lair of Svarts, very low level creatures. But there's 20 or 30 in there, including potential spellcasters and things like that, because that's how a structure of a Svart society works. And of course, they bumbled straight into the middle of it, and the Svarts slaughtered them. And that's how they learned. I don't know whether they tried to push me a little bit or just tried to not adjust to the fact that I'd removed some things that they'd been using as a bit of a crutch when they played 5th edition, like ranged healing and being able to get up in the middle of a fight, having recovered. These are things I took away. So they had to approach combat more carefully. They didn't. They got overwhelmed, and two characters died. One was left for dead, but was actually unconscious and survived. Got together another party, went back with the hope of finding bodies to possibly raise them. And no, the Svart priest had made a cloak out of the flayed skins of the dead PCs. Which I did on purpose just to make a point.
I recognize that tattoo. That's Bob.
No, Bob the fighter. He had so much potential. Damn it.
So, Hungar has joined us. Hello, Hungar. I'm just going to show Hungar.
It looks like he's on his way out too.
Is he?
Yeah, he just said like on his going to go play Conan Exiles. Have fun.
Oh right, Hungar. Before you go, thank you. You bought those. Thank you.
Have fun with Conan Exiles. I love that game.
Have fun with Conan Exiles. Yes. Yeah.
I've seen it. It looks pretty decent. Don't know if it's my cup of tea, but it looks fine.
My wife and I ran a server for it for some of my friends at work for a while. It was fun. I spent all my time building a giant fortress.
Nice. So is it basically just Hyperborean
system? I will build.
So is it just basically Hyperborean Minecraft essentially? From what I've seen, that's the vibe I kind of get from it.
It's more like Hyperborean World of Warcraft with fortress building. It's designed for open servers.
If you want to play Conan Exiles, there's your invite from Hungar.
Yeah.
Along with his mighty picture.
Buy his shirt.
Oh, yes, I have seen his shirt floating around. It does look fantastic. But, yeah.
But yeah. I've noticed though, like in my game of L&D, and this is kind of something we even talked about this after the last session, and I've started to notice this in my game. Language plays a huge part in the Lion and Dragon game that I play because they're Englishmen fighting in France, and most people don't speak English. They were fighting these wolf cultists in France at one point, and they needed to contract one of their NPCs because he was the only one that they could get because their other PCs were training for like 2 weeks of in-game time, so they couldn't use them. So they had to get him out of training to get him involved, and he very nearly died. And if he died during the mission, they couldn't talk to anyone. Oops. So
DK,
that'd have been funny.
I don't know if you noticed. I mean, you should use the English tourist approach to learning languages. If you shout slowly at the foreigner, they'll understand you.
I mean, that's true.
That's American.
I mean, that works in the modern age. But if an Englishman starts shouting at a Frenchman in a land ruled by anti-English frogmen, they're probably just gonna stab you for being a lunatic. I'm guessing. I don't know, but it's just kind of funny because it basically makes them think outside the box and have to be very careful because if they speak a tongue that it's like basically speaking in alignment like a lawful good speaking lawful good in front of chaotic neutrals or chaotic evils, it's not going to end well. You know,
I find language challenges to be difficult to keep up consistently, and they often become frustrating more than anything.
Well, yeah, that's because most people speak the common tongue. That's the problem, because or elves will have access to goblin and gnoll and basically a bunch of monster languages, as will the dwarves. So you'll just hand wave it. Whereas this, they can't hand wave it because the lingua franca is Latin, and that's spoken by academics. So unless they're aristocrats or scholars, virtually no one is going to speak it. So.
But I do quite enjoy in short doses role playing out little scenes with someone who speaks the PC's language but in a broken manner and doesn't fully understand what's being said. But it can get a bit tiresome after a while.
Oh yeah.
In most of my games, Common has a hard time conveying complex information because I treat it kind of like as a sort of a pigeon sort of a
generic
jargon,
language that everyone understands.
It's a trade language. It's meant
exactly.
for
In fact, in many of my campaigns, I replaced the name Common with Trade Tongue. Because and you can find a bathroom, figure out where you're going to get something to eat, or buy and sell stuff, but you're not going to explain high philosophy or the inner workings of magic to somebody with Common.
I mean, that's a way to do it. Yeah. I love Omenel. They yell at each other in Arabic. I couldn't tell if they were mad or not when Soaking them.
Saying right, true in Russian.
There was a comment back a little bit. I mean, I was wondering if anyone had any comments on my approach in terms of difficulty, whether as DK says, getting the ecology right is more important than. I mean, I know there's a modern obsession with balance. There was a bit of a balance in early D&D, but it was nowhere near the level.
You can see that they recognized it early on that there was a desire and a need to figure it out. I mean, there's a lot of work. Yeah. I've recently been kind of thumbing through, not reading in depth, Dragon magazine from issue 1, just kind of looking for concepts, and you can see that. I mean, in those earliest days, the game is developing, and what ideas are starting to form, and there's definitely that idea of balance and new stuff and trying to do things. But when I try to run games, I mean, for me, I like the ecology approach, but I like create. I tend to think of things just in terms of situations and not trying to design encounters in that kind of modern sense of, make sure you have your beats and all that. This is what's going on. This is the scene. and what makes sense for the scene. I also find that helps me as a DM adapt in play to what the players throw at me. If I have it too premeditated in terms of like tactics and strategy, some people even talk about doing AIs for monsters. Now that can be useful if you have a particularly complex monster, but I find just having a good solid situation in mind is the best way to go.
Yeah.
I tend to agree. I'm of that mind as well. Like I should say I don't. I rarely set out and design scenarios specifically to challenge. Every once in a while, like for example, I did the group found a treasure map, and so the treasure map had a cipher. So I created the cipher that was meant to challenge them. But I don't sit there and try to balance the encounters. I even when I run 5th edition, I toss that out the window. I play it old school style. It's like be prepared to run. Be prepared to flee. You have to use your judgment. You don't jump into a situation assuming I have made it beatable, because I do not. It's just about adjudicating the world. And the funny thing is, how many times have you tried to balance an encounter or challenge the players only to have them steamroll what you thought would be an epic challenge, and then they get steamrolled in return by something that you would have thought would be easy for them to defeat. It's like,
I think I've threatened my players more with minor creatures and their tactics than big baddies. I mentioned on a stream a couple streams ago, they went 3 deadly encounters back to back in 5e and survived them without any time to rest between encounters. They're just like one into the other, and at that point I was like, what do I gotta do? Meanwhile, they can be in a cave with some kobolds and
the kobolds get lucky rolls and that's it. Yeah, exactly. So just adjudicate the world and let the world take care of the challenges. The other thing that'll challenge players without even trying is simply the fact that they don't have all the information you have.
I think Michael said that earlier. Michael Stronghold here.
Yeah, there you go. And it's not even just the setting; it's the scenario. Like I'm sitting here with all my notes, and oftentimes I make the mistake of assuming that players are going to figure out what's going on, or maybe I haven't given them information I should have, or whatever. But sometimes the players' lack of knowledge will make it more challenging because they won't do what is necessarily logical, assuming they did have that information.
Yeah, to that effect, I mean, talk about challenging your players. Sometimes your players are going to challenge themselves more than you could ever. It's like you'll give them some basic information and they're off with it, and you're just kind of going, okay, have you just tried opening the door? Yeah. It was unlocked.
When I'm running in a published module, I will, as you say, eyeball it though. I'll take a look at the recommended level ranges and keep that in mind. I usually try to skew higher. If it's a level 1 to 3 module, for instance, I'll try to make sure the players are in the 2 to 3 range if I'm throwing it at them. The modules are notoriously deadly. Yeah.
A lot of them they tended to assume quite large players, party sizes, and often maybe only 3 or 4 players, but 5 or 6 henchmen that they would have armed to the teeth. That was an assumption that they'd pad out the party with a lot of other 0 and 1st level individuals who would be the meat shield. Yes.
And I'm watching some of your review caps, for example, and like they're giving the henchmen and they're like plate mail and stuff. I'm like, damn. And then the henchmen all left in the middle of the night because they had brand new plate mail. And
I'm just wondering though, like, what's your guys's? Because I'm just thinking about it here. What's your take on designing dungeons that like you'd say targeting things about the player, like say certain spells don't work, or like hiding rust monsters deep within the dungeon to attack the fighters' metal weaponry. Certain like casting webs or extreme booby traps for the the thieves and stuff, like this sort of thing. Like, how do you feel about doing that sort of stuff?
Doing it specifically to the group? No, I don't. I just lay out the scenario, and so if a rust monster appears, like if I'm designing a dungeon, I usually try to stock it randomly. Like I love using the First Ed Dungeon Master's Guide Dungeon Generator just to create fresh dungeons, and even I don't know what's coming.
Okay.
So yeah, I won't, unless, I mean, the exception, of course, like if they're facing off against an enemy who knows them and is prepping for their incursion, then yeah, okay, then I'll give myself some leeway. But otherwise, I'm not going to make challenges specifically to counter the players.
To hate on the players' abilities.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't. I don't go so far as that. I'm not above like deciding because I'm a DM and I want to have fun too. Going, Rust Monster sounds fun. I'm going to put a Rust Monster in here.
Mhm.
It's never done like punitively. It might be done with a little bit of a T because it's like you're going to watch the fighters cringe. But
just like the fighters just drop a deuce whenever you hear the word Rust Monster.
But
like, I'm just thinking,
you have to remember as a DM too, your fun is important as well. And so setting up interesting encounters is about the only way, besides watching the players interact with them, that you're going to have a lot of fun.
Right.
But yeah, I tend to use a lot of environmental effects if it makes sense. Like
I think that depends on the game. It depends on the game you're playing, though. In that sense, I mean, I know. I mean, I was running, as I said, I was running Reign of Terror on Saturday, and I was running pretty much by the book. So I wasn't doing any of the setting up. And yes, there were some interesting situations in there, but the most fun I was having was in the role playing of the NPCs, specifically there's a captain and an old doctor in there, and I was quite enjoying the bits where I was, for example, reminding the sergeant that he was in charge and the others were to listen to him, and listen to the way the players reacted to that, because Gingerbeard was playing the sergeant, and the way they were coming to some agreement where they decided that the youngest soldier in the group would be the one to go down to explore the catacombs of Paris, when the workers down there claimed to have spotted these yellow eyes in the darkness that the NPCs were saying, well, they must be rats or a cat or something. And the NPC was like saying, mais non, they were at eye level, as in human eye level. No, nonsense. You made it up. And the party were arguing amongst themselves about who would go down there. And it was just sort of decided that the sergeant would make a decision, and he picked the youngest one. You're the youngest. You're the newest to the team. Down you go. And he had to follow orders. So we had quite a nice sequence then, and it was Slan who was playing that particular character. And we had quite a nice little sequence of him going down there, being nervously using his lantern to try and look around and whatever. And I quite like those little bit, trying to set up those little bits of interplay. Try and set something up between the players to get them to role play and have a bit of role playing banter. And that's the sort of thing I enjoy.
What's another challenge that can come up is when the players come into organic conflict. It's like, no, I'm not going to that hole. You go to the hole. Well, you're the thief. What are you calling me a thief for? I'm no thief. I'm a specialist.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
it makes me think of the old old Aliens homebrew game I ran back with the West End game scenario, and just that whole squad of Marines so often just arguing and quibbling with each other, like, did I just end up with an entire party of Hudsons? It's like, and then it would take somebody, barking in order to get them to do it. But there's still that resentment and stuff. Or Star Trek RPGs, and one player's playing the captain, and everybody's on an away team. You're like, all right, if you say go over there, I'm going to check the color of my shirt and then grumble on my way.
Let's just hope it's not red.
Things like things you were saying about like rust monsters, I do like to sort of give a little warning that there's something nasty around the corner.
Yeah, so
they might see evidence of what lives there. And thinking of the ecology, if there's a rust monster around, then you would find, for example, the remnant, maybe the hilt of a sword where the blade has been corroded away,
or just
the
a corpse with all their plate.
You know?
Yeah,
Somebody
the
studded
plate
leather
armor is
all the
completely
studs
gone,
gone.
Yeah. Like they just see for some reason you know that this is the padding that goes underneath plate mail, but the plate mail is missing. It's like, that's weird. That's weird.
If
Oh yeah,
you're
and the
gonna throw a
straps, the straps.
Medusa or a cockatrice
You see
around,
statues
you're
every.
probably gonna
You
have
see
statues you know?
everywhere. Yeah. But, yeah, like, and I was just thinking about that. That this, I kind of want to make a dungeon now where like a druid has taken a rust monster as a pet, and she's using it to attack. Oh, nice, to attack wayward people, and all the traps are wooden or stone. There's like stone or clay golems. All the treasure is jewels, or it's stabs or magical loots for the bards. Things that don't have metal on them. I think that'd be kind of funny. I have to make that dungeon now.
But dungeons and kind of back to your original question and point about ecologies and stuff. I'm a very strong proponent of dungeons that make sense. I have a real hard time with Gygaxian ecology, and
I might start.
It can be fun, but I just after a while I'm like, there's a dragon in a room that's only got a 10-foot opening. So you have to polymorph every time he leaves the room. Yeah.
I might start though with similar to what Sean would do, for example, stocking the dungeon randomly. I might start, for example, I'd draw out a dungeon and pick out 3 or 4 key locations and then roll randomly for what's in those locations and then try and justify them and create and make the locations around them fit.
Yeah, and if you can't, you change one out, use your judgment and swap something out to finesse it and make it
or
work.
you can just randomly roll out your list ahead of time and then place them in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, I'll do that. And if I roll, for example, lair treasure, it won't be all in one place. It might be scattered amongst rooms. Some of the creatures might be carrying it.
It's neatly stacked in chests and bags, and because that's what unintelligent creatures do with their treasure.
Oh, of course, yes,
of course, yeah.
If you want to find the owlbear's copper pieces, then you're going to be digging through that nest and digging through owlbear poo.
Yeah, and getting infested with rot grubs.
I recall one of my last sessions, the party had rescued a bunch of prisoners from a dungeon, and they're like, "You can swim out back the way we came." And I'm like, "Do I need to remind you that water's full of quippers? The only reason you got through is because the ranger used animal friendship to talk with the quippers." And
what the hell is a quipper? I've never heard of a quipper before.
Dungeon piranhas.
Yes.
Oh,
cold water dungeon piranhas.
But piranhas are harmless in real life. They hardly attack humans, so.
Yes, because D&D is real life.
Yes, it is. Didn't you know?
So are most spiders in real life.
I wouldn't say they're harmless. Try bleeding in the water nearby them.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people get into tanks with piranhas in them, and they don't attack them.
Yeah,
they just swim away from them.
Because they're not bleeding.
That's true.
And it's only about 1/3 of the piranha species that are carnivorous anyway.
Vicious. Right.
It's the same with a lot of sharks as well. A lot of sharks will just
you'll see people
ignore you.
Swim up and boop a great
unless it's a bull shark.
Like some kind of
unless it's if it's a bull shark, then you might want to worry because those things will attack you.
Yeah, which is why I'm
tiger
not
sharks
living in Florida.
Really? Yeah, bull sharks. The
of course, I live on the Mississippi, and bull sharks make it up that thing all the time.
Oh, goody! That's fun.
And Gene is exactly right with this comment here. A random roll can lead to creative thinking as to why it's there, how it got there, who put it there. It can help. Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the limited palette concept. If you roll up, say, like 5 or 6 monsters randomly, your brain will actually come up with much more creative solutions. Not just adapt. It's just like with art.
Fill in the
give yourself
gaps,
6 colors. Yes. Instead of the full range of colors that you have, you're going to become more creative with those, and your creativity
because limitations breed greatness.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. Yes, yeah. I mean, I had some. I'm running treasure hunt on Monday night, and as I say, those characters they had no spells, no thief skills. They were using items that they managed to find. They were throwing rocks. They were. They decided to bull rush their jailer, and that's when I had to improvise a load of overbearing grappling rules because the AD&D rules are rubbish, and they were very creative and very thoughtful, and it was an interesting session because they were as characters they were so limited in their abilities. The only abilities they had really to begin with were their attribute scores and the random backgrounds that they'd rolled on from the table in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide. So we had the guy who'd been a sailor trying to work out the wind direction and that sort of stuff, trying to work out where shelter is. Yeah, that is absolutely fine. And I fully expect the two that have both been animal handlers to try and use that sort of skill at some point to work out how to deal with wild animals. And there's one who's got a background of being a gambler. That hasn't come into it yet, but I can see how that could be used. And these sort of things, just having those limitations and as I say, a very limited palette to work with, it creates a more interesting game. I think it makes that certainly has made the players more creative. And as you say, if you've got that limited framework to start with in terms of what the DM is doing, it makes the DM more creative as well in terms of justifying why things are where they are and trying to work some form of ecology into their dungeon.
And that ties into challenging the DMs too, because that's part of the fun is in creating those justifications rather than having it all mapped out in advance. You don't have to know everything. The things that come up spontaneously are your challenge. And fun, it's usually fun to, you get stumped in a moment and it's like, no, I got it. Here you go. This is the reason that this is there, or this person said this, or for the reason, like, I'm sorry, Michael Stronghold's saying here now, if the thing doesn't make obvious sense, you get to come up with why the trolls, gnolls, and giants are working together, figure it out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It's like the whole Caves of Chaos being the staging ground for something bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, like I develop cults for my Lion and Dragon game with I think Cults of Chaos, and it lets you develop everything about the cult, where they're from, what they do, what kind of resources they have, where their secret base is. It develops everything, and you can select them if you want. But I find it actually is a lot more interesting if you just go, I'll just roll randomly and see what happens. And I've gotten some really, really weird results out of it. Like, unfortunately, I haven't gotten to use them yet. I really hope I do. But, they're really good for seeding adventures. And I've even, when I did my London game, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance because the game kind of tanked. But, I had 3 cults interlock with in Southwark, I don't know how to pronounce it, or Southwark on the Southwark. Thank you very much. Southwark, on the outskirts of London, where they're operating, had a brothel that was a pleasure cult that was tied to a cult of boroughs in London Major, and I think they had another cult tied with them. On top of that, the guy running the cult in London was extremely powerful because he had another cult that associated with him. And another cult he directly controlled because that cult was one of his lovers. So he was incredibly powerful. Unfortunately, the players never got to meet him. But, these things
you had
happen.
the ideas there, and those ideas can easily go into a future game. You never
In my campaign, when the party was on its way to the mountains to find the cult of Orcus, I'm like, I need something to break up this travel time. So I'm like, I'm going to turn to a page in the monster manual, 5e monster manual, and I'm going to use this monster. And it ended up being a Lamia, and I'm like, I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with a Lamia? This place is not exactly Lamia. So I'm like, but where they're traveling through is an area of the world where there's lots of barrows. I'm like, okay, this Lamia's got a lair in one of these old barrows, and I lured them there by having them find horses from the cultists kind of wandering around on their own without their riders, and they, the cultists must be nearby, and they followed it back and had this great encounter with the Lamia was just screwing with the party with all of her spell-like abilities, illusions and phantasmal whatever. I can't remember all the spells, but no, it was all the like being able to make noises and stuff like "help me," little kid noises from down the
minor image and major
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just all that fun stuff that got them going deeper and deeper into this barrow until she had them cornered, and then she attacked them. And it went wrong, and she tried to escape, and but no, that was a fun encounter. I would have never done it if I hadn't decided like I'm just gonna randomly turn to a page of the monster manual.
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting way to do random encounters. Just flip through the book. Where I stop is what you face.
There's a lot of times. I mean, I'll write like whole little side adventures based on just something I flipped through and saw. I keep a Google Drive doc open with just ideas, like none of them are fleshed out, but like I'll grab a Dyson map and like this looks really cool, and sometimes I'll even use his prompts, or I'll read about a monster, going through a monster manual, one of the old ones, new ones, and I'll be like, I could do something with that, and so I'll just outline something, but inspiration, you take it and you run with it.
I mean, I'm trying to work out something for this weekend's MERP game on Saturday night. I haven't got anything yet. All I know is that the players want to go into the Chetwood near Bree to go hunting for herbs. They've decided to try and create a stash of herbs for their adventuring. I've got to try and come up with something interesting there. I don't know.
Create a random encounter chart.
At them. Just throw a Nazgul at them.
Create a random encounter chart and let it be a surprise to you as well. Okay, here's 10 monsters, and we'll see on the day what happens.
Talk about limited palette, though. Middle Earth is one of those fantasy settings that is very sparse on the number of things that there are in the world and how frequently they show up. It's not like, I mean, Middle Earth is very much kind of a low fantasy, but it's not low fantasy, but it's like, I guess it is sort of, because it's not like you're going to find a hole full of orcs every 10 feet like you do in most D&D worlds, right?
Mm-hmm. No. I mean, the only enemies they've encountered so far are humans and three undead, but two were created by one of the others. So yeah, that's all they've encountered so far. Hello, Saxius.
Hello.
I didn't think you'd be joining us tonight.
Great.
Well, I thought my game was going to be running much longer, but it's just one player, one DM. So yeah, no, we managed to do it in about 2 hours, and then we spent about an hour just discussing like plans, plots, and general directions that the player wants to take from there.
It's been forever since I've run a one-on-one game, and they're so efficient.
Now remember, I deal with Excel sheets of efficiency.
Well, I'm just saying you don't have an entire party spending an hour deliberating what to do with the door.
Oh God, no. No, but it's funny though, because in the prep work for this, finding a way to challenge one player, and he was playing a wizard, and it's basic fantasy, so we're dealing with 1d4 hit points, and I gotta find a way to challenge him. At the very least mentally or socially, so that he sort of doesn't just waltz around and doesn't get opposed. So that was interesting. So it was a very social game with a lot of challenges for him to adapt really quickly to the fact that he is a wizard in a town where the masses are afraid of wizards, but the nobility loves wizards and will want them to be whisked away into their, houses, so that they can be used for their own, Game of Thrones. Exactly, because there's a lot of the general rule in this city is that the nobility does fight, but it has to be done in a theatrics kind of way, not in like entertainment, but the audience, as in the wider city, is not allowed to know that they're fighting. So their goons will do the fights between each other while wearing civilian clothes, and they're not allowed to show any symbols of their houses and lineages, which is the player has decided that he wants to make allies with one of the houses, which means he's going to have to start playing by these rules. So he's been challenged to basically go and learn as much as he could. So the player had to be very active about engaging and interviewing people to assimilate and learn what he could. And then there are other things going on, but that's here and there.
You mentioned about someone mentioned something about spending. Oh, it's Alpha mentioned something about players spending a long time thinking about a simple door. Mm-hmm. Michael said earlier, you're doing a good job as a DM when they start overthinking simple things, and then he might lead into something that they themselves thought of. Now, if a party, I said in my video I did yesterday, if a party start discussing and maybe overthinking something and coming up with little ideas, I will just do this and leave them to it, because they are creating ideas for me more often than not.
Get the notebook ready. Yeah.
Of course. But it also shows that they're invested in the world that they're playing in. And I like that. I won't hurry them. But I do want to come to... Brian's mentioned a very specific instrument. Oh, I see. Example, I see you replied to here, Alpha. But how would I explain the Blue Dragon in room 97 of the Lower Pyramid, level 9 of Lost City? What I would do, that Blue Dragon would have polymorph ability. It would be polymorphed into a human, and I would play up the intensely lawful evil greed of Blue Dragons and have it as a Blue Dragon masquerading as an envoy from somewhere, but who's just got the intention of enriching itself and not letting on that it's actually a dragon. It would be there to try and make money and get the hell out.
That's a good way to use the dragon if you're going to use the dragon. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of sidestepped it by changing it with a monster that makes more sense.
So. Yeah.
And does the same thing, massive lightning damage. So.
Hey, you mentioned the Behir, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But how would that Behir have got there?
How would that what?
How would that Behir have got there?
They're underground creatures, so
they are.
They burrow their way in there.
Yeah.
If I remember, so are blue dragons. If I remember correctly.
What?
Yeah, but the Behir are those serpentine little multi-leg things, and so getting through the underground makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
I remember my party finding a wyvern's lair through the bottom of it and deciding that they were going to steal a shed stinger. I just assumed or as it grew, it would shed its old stinger points and stuff. And they took it back to town and told everybody that they'd killed a Behir, not a Behir, but a wyvern, and they never even faced the wyvern. They came into the tail end of the cavern underneath it, and they're like, "There's a wyvern up there." And then one of them was like, "Can I look around? Are there any shed claws or like old like things for as it grew?" And I'm like, talking about ecology, I'm like, yes, it makes perfect sense that if it's been here for a while, there'd probably be something from it. And so they went and lied to the village about having slain a wyvern and got free drinks and room and board and for a few days.
Sorry, because I assume they're smart players. They got the fuck out of Dodge.
Oh yeah. They weren't hanging around
Good.
there because they were like second level, I think, when they did that.
K5K says to create challenge in those overthinking moments, set a timer. The clock is ticking. Yes, sometimes when applicable.
If the players are engaged and back and forth, let them have it.
Yeah.
It's
well,
when people are sitting out there bored, then it's like, okay, we gotta get going. But I actually keep a tally counter, and I count off the rounds. So even if they're making a plan for 10 real minutes, I'll just click off 10, game minutes. So time is passing, especially in a dungeon, because you got to factor in the wandering monsters and time passage, torches going out, things like that.
I would just in real life, I have a dust timer, like one of those sand hourglass timers, and I'd say, okay, while they're talking, I'll just start setting that up, and then I'll just start rolling dice. And every time it recycles, I flip it around, and if they're still talking, I roll again at the end of it, and then they'll start realizing what I'm doing. Like, I'll just go, nothing.
It can be good sometimes to have scenarios that are generally based around time limits as well. I mean that this can add to a challenge. One of the Cthulhu scenarios I ran recently, an Amaranthine Desire, the party are whisked back to an alternate version of the town where they live, about 700 years before. And in order to get back to their own time, they've got to prevent a witch being burnt. And the way I ran that is that the witch was burnt at a certain point, either if they just sat back and let things happen, or if they played for an hour.
I'll take adventures that can't take place in America for 500. Goes back 700 years before. Hey, look, woods, endless forest.
But once they realised, I've run it twice now. Once the party realise that as soon as they hear the bell ringing, the whole thing will reset. They'll go back to the beginning, but their characters will be 10 years older. They get a move on. And obviously, if their characters are about 30 when they start, they've got 5, maybe 6 resets before they die of old age. And that's
not if they're enough, they aren't.
And when I ran it, another little nice mechanic in it is, depending on how many resets they have, is what time they go back to. In order to go back to their own time, they have to do it without the bell ringing at all, which is nigh on impossible. Every time I've run it, it's been at least 2 resets. So they've started in the 1890s and they've reappeared back in 1960s or 1950s. So it's quite a nice little scenario, that. But I've spoiled that one for all of you, like if any of you ever play it. But it don't matter.
My brain's like a sieve these days, so don't worry, I'll forget by the time the stream is done.
Halakar throwing massive shade at you and I, Geek. Him saying Europeans tend to forget there were already people living in America when they, quote, discovered it. Okay?
Yeah, well,
yeah, but the population concentrations were not that great,
except
for in certain areas. Now, some areas were massively populated, but there's actually a really good book on it, but that's a different story.
Oh, Central America.
I remember
Central America.
I remember.
America.
Yeah, I remember Dan. What was it? Dan Carlin or Dan Dillon? He does a podcast. He did something on the Celts, and he mentioned the fact that, like, the Aztecs could mobilize the Celts could mobilize the same that the Aztecs could, like, tens of thousands of guys in the battlefield. If Europeans, like, it didn't colonize North America but colonized South America the same way they did North America, it would be an entirely different story, because the Aztecs were unbelievably massive in their empires. North America is a little bit different. Just a little
First
bit.
Contact in the Northeast, there's an English explorer that's quoted as saying something to the effect that the smoke along the Hudson was as thick as London because of the population of natives in the Northeast. And then first contact happens, and then they come back within like a season or two, and 75% of that population is dead.
Yeah,
from
all the
disease.
diseases. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like 80%
So
of the
the whole
Yeah.
Was it the whole Iroquois or pre-Iroquois nation up there? That whole it was pretty substantial, that northeastern area, and then poof, gone. Yeah.
Is this around the Manhattan area that you're talking
northeast?
About?
It's
yeah. That's where they get all their bows, I think, from. Because I think that's what Manhattan meant in their language, the place where we get the bows or something like that.
But anyways,
so
timers. I like environmental timers too. Like instead of an actual like physical timer, like having things that go off in the environment every so many turns. Did a battle inside a geothermal cave once, where they were on a floor that was unstable and pretty much just a crust of limestone over a deeper passage below, and every so many turns part of the floor would fall out as they were trying to travel across it because they had destabilized it. So it was a big room, and they're fighting in it too with something that's not touching the ground. There's something flying, I think like giant bats or some crap like that. But yeah, or an
so it's a platform video game almost in some
kind of, yeah. But you can take a lot of good examples from video games. There were other battles that had like hot gases and vapor coming out of vents in the walls. The entire atmosphere in that dungeon was harsh enough to where they're constantly having to make constitution checks. Yeah, because it's full of, even if it's not in a gas filled chamber, it's just hot and oppressive. And if you're wearing metal armor, it's even worse.
Some of those early dungeon modules, I mean, some of they've seen now as fun houses, but some of those had some great little encounters that could be expanded upon and used. And the environment in those sort of funhouse, okay, they didn't always make a lot of sense, but these were encounters where the environment made the encounter interesting. Look, for example, at the crab in the boiling bubble in White Plume Mountain. What a genius encounter that is. You've got this giant crab with its big sharp pincers in this bubble, surrounded by boiling water, and if you pierce the bubble during the combat, you risk getting boiled alive.
I always remember there's a newer monster, I think, in one of the Kobold Press books that's a shark in a big mobile bubble of water. And I remember somebody seeing that, oh, that's so dumb. I'm like, no, that's totally old school, man.
Yeah. And there's things, I mean, like parts of Tomb of Horrors had mini sort of environmental challenges. The room with the shaking floor and the green slime was a lot of fun. Okay, it was just one enclosed room, didn't make a great deal of sense, but it was totally the environment that made that lethal. And Ian McDonald's mentioned here the geysers in White Plume Mountain, another great example of it's a timed hazard. The geysers will go off every so often.
I gotta say, with Green Slime, those old TSR ads in the backs of the comic books had me feeling that Green Slime was going to be a much bigger threat in Dungeons than it actually was.
It's only as much of a threat as the DM wants it to be.
Always.
The best use of Green Slime I ever saw was my players were going through the village of Homlet in the moat house, and they were getting swarmed by zombies. Most people will know the room where that is. And you've just come past a bit where Green Slime tries to drop on you, and you've also found a little armory. My players ran back to the armory, picked up all the spears, dipped the spears in the Green Slime that had tried to drop on their heads, and used those spears against the zombies. Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. And here's Omanal to join us as well. And there we are. We have the full complement of 6. Hello, Omanal.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. So I just have 200 more kettlebell swings for the day.
You're still working on those. Yes, and Ian's mentioned the poison gas in the Hidden Shrine of Tabocha. But if you're playing that as a campaign adventure, you can't really use the gas to its full extent. It's there for the tournament. So, using the environment as a challenge. Other examples of that, you've got Dark Sun as a whole.
How about A4, where not only did they have to deal with darkness, they had to deal with escaping by going through those tunnels to find their way out before the entire thing collapses on them.
Yeah. Oh, Halakar's mentioned that. Yeah. A4, the whole environment is a challenge there.
What's A4 again?
In the dungeons of the slave lords.
In the what of the slave? In the what of the slave lords?
Okay.
Yeah. In the dungeons of the slave lords. It's a
Right.
mid-level adventure where the party start off without any weapons or equipment or light source or provisions or any idea where they really are, in complete darkness.
Is that connected to the reptile god?
No.
No.
No, I don't think so.
It's A1 through A4, with A4 being the final, where they have to capture and they have to escape. As in the meantime, what is it? It's a volcano that's erupting. It basically feels like, hey, we had this. We just wanted to go through and talk about Herculaneum because we saw it on the PBS last week.
I'll be right back, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to mention something which Elfbait's familiar with, but most people are not. For anyone that's actually looked at it, is the Star Frontiers Crash and Volturnerus, where two things. One is you had to survive on whatever pack was in your lifeboat. That's what you had to use. And then you had to cross over in so many hexes. That was one for the environment. So that was much more dangerous than most of the monsters. The monsters were kind of a way to break it up, whereas the sun was going to kill you along with starvation, dehydration. And then the other one was at one point you have to go into these tunnels and you get separated from the group, the player characters from the NPCs. They get separated from the group and they have to figure out a couple of ways of how to cross a giant molten bubbling river almost. And they have these giant crystals. And so then the players have to figure out how they're going to do it. They can use logs, they can use rope. That was very interesting to look at because it really just simply says, well, here you go. It gives you some supplies and say, all right, good luck. and the players have to figure out how to cross this. It's not quite even a maze, but you have to figure out how to cross over the crystals, and there's spaces in between, and how to go from place to place for that.
Well, that sort of segued a little bit into the next topic I wanted to sort of come on to, because I think the best environmental challenges certainly in published adventures and things I do try to mimic in my own are ones where you set up a challenge with no specific solution and then sit back and let the players think about it. And then as a DM, you've just got to try and run with it and work out what they're attempting. But does it logically have a chance of success? How do you adjudicate whether it's successful? What sort of basis do you use to adjudicate that? And I think that's something that comes with experience. And certainly those of us who've got a bit of an old school grounding, where characters didn't have the free use of defined skills, I would say old school DMs are better equipped to adjudicate for those sort of situations.
Well, and I'll mention Star Frontiers in particular. Again, this is where Elfbait remembers this. It allowed you to use skills. It even encouraged the use of skills. But the skills were not a replacement for what they were thinking. The skills were how well you did it. And I think that's part of the problem you're kind of getting sometimes the more modern games is rather than allowing them to automatically succeed if they do the right thing, or to see that, how well you did it. It's kind of like, well, I'll use this, and then you should tell me, because instead of thinking, they're using the skill as a substitute for thinking. And I think that's a problem whenever you have it with the players. Now, that said, and I don't know how, because I was listening before, is when you start doing some things like puzzles. Well, I don't expect the characters to always know what's going on, so then I may give hints or recommendations of things they can do without giving them the answer, depending on how well they're rolled. Like saying, "Oh yeah, you would understand this, so okay, I'll give you. Here's a couple of hints on the cipher." Now the players have to do the rest, but I've been helping you out.
I mean, how do you guys tend to approach that sort of side of it in terms of coming up with solutions to these sort of open environmental, very much a facet of location-based adventures rather than event or story-based adventures, where here's a location. The location pretty much is the challenge, and there's no fixed solution. How much time do you give them? How much rope do you give them? And how do you tend to factor in their skills and their character abilities? I mean, are there any techniques you tend to use?
How much rope do I give them? Enough to either just get out of the hole or to hang themselves with.
I'm gonna quote Patton, which was, "Don't tell them how to do it. Tell them what you want done." And now that said, I believe that you should be doing too, as a DM. You should have 2 or 3 things in their mind to allow them to do it, not just one. That's the problem I have with a lot of times. They'll just do it one. Give them. You have an idea of 2 or 3 things that they can do, and then let the players come up with stuff. And if you think it's a good idea, let them run with it.
I tend to not actually have solutions in mind for a lot of environmental hazards and stuff. I just create the hazard and then see what they come up with. I mean, and then if it seems reasonable, we can test for it. And then, like, if I'm playing a game, for example, like 5th edition, that has, skill tests and difficulty, class, I can always adjust the difficulty class based on their idea. If their idea is flimsy but it could work, probably going to have a higher difficulty, but
I'm going to use this like they come to a chasm. Doesn't matter what it is. How do you want to cross the chasm? And then let the players try to figure out what they're going to do.
You know what my players did? They tied a rope to the small character and had the large character throw the small character across the chasm.
And you know what?
And that became their go-to for the rest of the campaign. Every time they came to a place where they needed to get a rope across, the monkey goblin had the rope tied around her waist, and the orc in the party chucked her across trucked her the distance.
Nobody tosses a dwarf.
The monkey goblin thought it was great.
well, and it depends on how far you're looking at it. Yeah, that's exactly it. But then I'd start going, well, you understand when you swing back, you're going to hit that wall. If he doesn't quite throw you far enough, so
that was
always 6 damage. There you go.
Of course, it did get a little crazy when the orc and the goblin character are contemplating making. Can we build a small catapult that you can wear upon your shoulders?
Well, okay. That comes to the old Warhammer fantasy when you start getting the orcs, the goblins with their catapults.
Yeah. Hey, doom divers.
Yeah, exactly.
Goblin doom divers.
I mean, when it comes to just environment, I create the environment. And then I go, right, what are the 3 solutions I can think of? And then the rest, those are the ones that I can think of that can solve it. And then from there, whatever the players think up of, there you go. I don't pigeon them into it has to be A, B, or C. They can still be creative and turn around and be like, oh, hey, well, there is, acid on the floor. Well, if we knock over these stones and then we do, we play the Flawless Lava. floor is lava. Then that's another way. Yeah, absolutely, they can do that. They can start, making use of mage hand, and then tie up various points of rope, and then just climb across from that way, or whatever else you can start thinking of when you start involving magic in the third dimension.
Yeah, I tend to also try to reserve, like Owen was saying, I don't think you can create a situation without automatically just having something in mind, because it's going to pop in. But if I make a particularly difficult obstacle, I do like to have some alternate route, like an environmental issue. Kind of that whole decaying the dungeon kind of a bit, where you have the loop arounds and the alternate routes and stuff, because ultimately I still want them to go on the adventure. So if I've got that crusty floor that they're going to fall through, well, there's probably another passage that would get them there if they want to backtrack and find it. It may not be safer. It might just be more direct and not require a challenge. So maybe it's going through the kobolds or going around the kobolds, but you have to cross the crusty floor. Yeah.
I'm going to bring up another topic. So we're talking about this, but sometimes you create an obstacle with the intention that they don't go that direction. And
that is
when
true.
and when they come up with an idea that allows them to get past that, then I'll allow you to do it. But that's some of the times when I'm like, look, I have created this chasm with the idea that you're not going to cross it. It's meant to turn you around and get you back on your path, and then you're going, oh, we're going to do this. You know what?
And at that point, I'm probably going to give them some bonus XP.
Oh, absolutely.
For coming up with something amazing. But,
at that point, I'm going to panic, so I probably haven't prepared the bit beyond.
Pull out the DMG and randomly determine the next part of the dungeon.
Sometimes the obstacle can be based on their perception and not the environment itself. I remember one game, they come up to a big fungus-filled cavern. Like, big cavern, right? Like open space.
Yep.
And they're terrified, of course, because fungus. Anything fungus in D&D is your nightmare, because 6 kinds of fungus are going to try and kill you. But they notice there's a path going down the middle of it. So they're like, all right, we're going to stick to the path. And the halfling decides to go ahead because he's the rogue scout. We're playing 3-5 at the time. And he goes ahead, and I start describing to the rest of the party how they see these filaments come down and start fishing around. There's cave fissures above this cavern, and they're trying to get the halfling, but the range, because he's short, is just at the end of their filaments. So the party is standing at the other side of the cavern watching these 2 cave fishers trying to fish around for this halfling as it crosses across the cavern. And that was the obstacle. Okay, you've got a big open area, you've got all this fungus that you may or may not be harmful, and there are cave fissures above you. Now how are you going to get across?
You get on your hands and knees then and crawl.
Exactly. That's what they ended up doing. Is they decided to, we're going to go real slow because we're crawling, except for the halfling.
Well, you do that, but I have 2 other things that I would think of. One is, well, how big is, are these mushroom type of fungi? Because they are, I might cut them and then, since they're cave fishers, is then put the mushrooms on the cave fisher tongues. If they're doing the lore.
Oh yeah.
That's one, and then the other one is which is a little bit more devious. If you really want psychedelic cave fishers, that would be kind of fun from a DM standpoint. But then the other point is then you start getting like your poisons and stuff, and you cook it to their tongues as they're trying to fish for you.
The cavern was particularly nasty because if they had ventured into the fungus and they eventually in a fight they ended up having to go through it, there were a couple of Odiugs wandering around, like layering out in the nasty fungus. So it was a pretty deadly cavern. It was designed to be one of those places that, okay, if you're going to get across it, it's going to be dangerous because it's effectively a huge portion of underground wilderness. So
I'm getting a bit tired, guys. I'm going to tap out. See ya.
All right. Cheers, DK.
Goodbye.
No, I like that. I'm trying to think.
I'm gonna. You're talking about adventures, and I don't know if I've shown this book off before, but I really like this book right here, which is not too expensive.
Who's that by?
Jeff Ashworth.
Traps, Puzzles, and Dungeons.
I think it was for $20, which is a good deal. I mean,
Yeah.
for a hardcover, and it has, like you were talking about earlier, the it does ciphers and things like that. It does musical. It does a few of the things, talk about different traps and rhymes and riddles, which are something I'd have a problem making up with. So,
Riddles. I mean, yeah, you can coming up with riddles as a challenge is an absolute nightmare because you can spend hours thinking of a really convoluted riddle that they might solve in seconds. You could spend seconds coming up with something you think is really simple, and they can just flail around for hours and not get it. It's very difficult to gauge the difficulty of puzzles.
I'm horrible with riddles.
well, and those are the cases where if the players don't get it, I would allow a roll, for intelligence. Because I want them challenged and I want them to think, but I don't want it so hard that they can't get it.
Yeah.
And that's I think that this comes down to different things for players. Everyone always talks about, well, you don't cater to the players. Well, I don't think that's entirely true. I think you are catering both to yourself and your players. And if one of your players likes puzzles, you put puzzles in there. If they all like, if they like social activities, you try making a variety of things just to keep yourself interested along with the players.
Yeah, everybody's going to have something in there to engage them, and that's all about knowing your players.
And that always goes back to my brain too. I'm not making the fighter stand up and show me his his real life swordsman's prowess. It's like,
and you can give hints for things, or like, well, you might want to do this. It looks like this is how the cipher might be solved, and then make them sit down and do it. I don't know if you ever remember. You're talking about the Fighting Fantasy book, and some of the other ones. They would have riddles in there. I don't expect everyone to know how to do their algebra, sitting down doing all that the entire time. But I do want them to, I do want them to have to think about what's going on and realize not everything's going to be perfect. And like you said, it's having alternate ways. What I want to call the Gordian knot incident. Well, you can solve it if you can untie it. And,
it's only rope. Just burn it. Fireball solves everything.
Well, and the fighter just simply cuts it. It's like, well, congratulations.
No.
So
if I'm going to do a puzzle in a dungeon, I like to try to put hints to the solution elsewhere in the dungeon. I've got one. It's a barrow creep, and you go through, and there's carvings in the stone that show like a funerary boat sailing off into the sky through parting clouds with the sun coming down. And later on, you find a door that has similar motifs, but they're not in the right place in the carving on the door. And of course, if the guys do their, I guess in old school D&D, it would be like find, remove traps kind of a thing, detect secret doors kind of a thing. They can find out that the piece of embossment on the door can move around, and so if the players move the parts to the door to match the carvings they saw, like part the clouds and then slide the boat up between them in the carving on the door unlocks and they can get through. But I'm not going to expect them to go ahead and meet that door head on and go, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
And I know that Geek, you talked about the module Pharaoh. They have it where you meet a Sphinx in there, if I remember correctly, and it asks a question.
Yeah.
So it's. I'm not saying everything goes into it. I think that sometimes putting in puzzles is a way for characters to have to bypass maybe some combat or to find secret ways. But part of the reason that I like doing person-to-person role-playing games versus playing the computer is the computers you have to do X or Y. Yeah. And the whole thing of why I play with people, I don't have to do X or Y. I can go a different way. So yeah.
I mean, it's really important as a DM to keep an open mind when it comes to puzzles regarding their solutions. As with any challenge, however you put a challenge down in a scenario, a DM, you've got to have this. If you close your mind off to options, then to me that's bad DMing. A DM needs to sit there and just be open to ideas. The challenge is there to engage the players. Let it engage the players. And let them try and come up with something, sometimes quite tenuous, but something. And if it's got a hint of logic to it, on the fly, just come up with some way of possibly allowing it to work, or partially working.
Even with riddles, I mean, I've played it into the fun of the role playing. You know, a fey creature gives out some sort of riddle that I've come up with ahead of time. And like I said, I'm horrible with riddles. So my players throw out some answer that totally makes sense with the riddle, but wasn't the answer that the fey had in mind, and then play with it. He's like, yeah, I guess so. You know, kind of a thing.
Yeah, well, and yeah.
Curse you, Rumpelstiltskin. You know, kind of a thing.
Well, and that's the way I believe it too. Is if it matches everything, go, yeah, you got it. And you're like, oh, okay. And that's to me, it's the best way to, as a DM, to play, which is, and this is me personally, is I want to be your advocate, but I'm going to screw you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know full well. For example, like I had one adventure that, the passage is blocked by a boulder, and the party's like, well, how big of a boulder? And they're going through all this deliberation. Can we move it? Can we force it? I'm like, you can try and do some strength checks, but it's like it's a boulder. And then one of the players looks down at his character sheet. He's like, could I use the reduce spell on it? I'm like, yeah, you could. So they shrunk the boulder down and crawled over it. It was smaller.
I'm going to bring something that I wish
that spell, by the way, the enlarge and reduce in 5e is so useful.
Well, I'm going to
It's
bring
useful in any edition.
Well, like their way of getting through locked doors now is he just casts reduce on the lock and it falls out of the door. It's like
I'm gonna bring up something that if you look at the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons DMG, so the 1E, it had a lot of spells in there telling you how to use them differently, or what else they can be used for. Yeah, exactly. And I wish that 5e did some of that. Sometimes I feel that 5e has become so prescriptive for the spells, it limits the creativity of the players. And
I think that's purposeful design to try and because they do have Adventurers League, which they like to milk, and there does seem to be a bit of a theme in there about trying to get people to play in the same sort of way, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But certainly the language that's used in the spells is to try and remove the vagueness that was in the previous editions. But to me, it was that vagueness that made spellcasting interesting.
I've gone through a bunch of the old school spells and compared them to the newer ones, and they're not really that much different. The DMG does have that thing, but the one thing I think that's important to point out there, it's not in the main rule book with all the spells. It's in the DMG. No. So it's kind of, and it's sort of secondary information, much like the DMG is in 5th edition, despite it being probably the best core book in 5th edition. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, but like you're saying, the Adventures League, it is. I mean, you read it, and it is so. How do I want to put this? It is becoming so mechanical that you lose the vagary and wonder of spells, and that's the problem that I've had. Yeah, a lot of us.
That goes back to AD&D, though. I mean, AD&D was already starting to try to codify things in a very specific. I mean, look at the description of Fireball and the mini lesson on physics that it gives you.
Well, I'm not disagreeing, but look at the Dungeon Master's Guide. It gives you alternate ways the spells can be used.
Well,
that's what I mean. Is it allowed you to do that? And yes, you're right. Some of the players went way over, but I understand why some of that exists. But man, you look at the newer ones, and it's like, oh no, you can't use it this way. You can't use it that way. And to be fair on this, is 5e also makes things like, I hate, we talk about social encounters. What is it? Friends or whatever? And it says, oh, as soon as the spell wears off, they know that you cast it on them.
And they're hostile.
It's all the charm spells.
Yeah.
Any of the charm spells are like that.
And from I'm like, then it's the most useless spell ever, unless I'm trying to get by some enemy. What's the point?
Yeah.
That's why I get frustrated and mad at 5e in particular. I'm not really.
I think I mean
5e's
spells
written
like
for the world that exists in.
Spells like that after first ed, like I love first ed's friend spell, where it's just a charisma increase, but if they succeed on their saving throw, it's a charisma decrease, right? But they don't automatically become hostile.
Yeah.
Whereas in all the later editions is like the enemies are the opponent, the person who's been charmed is instantly hostile and wears off, and it's got a duration of minutes. And 5e, the cantrip for the same thing. It's like, okay, so you get one minor little bit of influence and then they're hostile. Say, really, really useful there. Thanks, Wizards of the Coast.
It's an escape spell nowadays, really. I think.
Yeah, I think there's a weird assumption, and I know this is totally tangential to the topic of the stream, but it's like that the charm spells necessarily being charmed necessarily constitutes a bad interaction. And if I charmed you and asked you some questions and did you no harm, is there any real reason for you to be hostile to me? Yeah, unless you were before. Yeah.
Well, I would always argue that if the NPC knows or understands what kind of like spell has been used against them, like if they understand what a charm spell is and the fact that their mind has been affected especially against their will, at that point, yeah. But that would then be down for like whether the NPC sees it as an invasion of it.
It's kind of funny. I think 5th edition suffers in a lot of ways from some of the problems that we saw with 2nd edition, in that it's being written with the world it exists in, like real world that it exists in. 2nd edition got rid of demons, devils, a lot of the talk about playing evil because of the world and now, of course, 5th edition has to keep in mind the ethics of the spells and what kind of ethics it's portraying, because it is a mass market product.
Yes,
it's not Greasy Mike's OSR shenanigans book that he publishes 500 copies for. It's D&D put out by Hasbro, put out by WotC, the #1 giant thing that may as well have a big beam shown on the moon with the D&D ampersand on it.
Well, I'm going to bring this up though. Is you think that what it would have is if you've been charmed, but you would think that it would be a much more subtle spell, and then play. They could go, oh, okay. I mean, otherwise. There's a lot of things that they took away from 5e that really encouraged some of the unique, non-linear, non-traditional uses of spells and abilities, I think. And
bring it back to topic. That is a problem for challenging players in a lot of cases, is that the methods used in like the modern games, in the modern 5e, make it trickier when a player can legitimately just look down at his skill if you're playing that kind of a game, or they're used to playing that way, and die roll their way through anything.
Yeah.
Because if they have a skill for it, they can do it. Yeah.
I think, coming up to the challenges thing, and talking about how I want to come to Andrew's comment here. The whole idea of the rule of cool. People have pushed that too far at times, but it says here, if the idea fits, they have a chance of success. Something I'm not sure if it was rule of cool, but on playing in Treasure Hunt, Halakar sort of going into lurker mode, so he got. But he would know this encounter. It's very early on in the adventure. The party have just got away from their captivity, and the first thing they come across is a battle between rival groups of goblins and orcs. And there were 12 goblins and there were 6 orcs fighting each other. And the party consisted of 5 0 level. One of them had managed to get some armor. They'd got a couple of weapons between them, no spells, no skills to speak of. One NPC who's not going to help in fights. So obviously, if they wade into this encounter, they're going to be dead. But they're on a bluff overlooking a ravine where the fight is taking place, and it does describe the hillside as being quite loose. And in the adventure, it suggests that they possibly try to cause a landslide and start taking the goblins and orcs out by rolling rocks down the slope. And it says in there that it does say characters should make an open doors check, which is a lesser strength check in AD&D terms, to see whether they start the landslide. One of my players turned around and went, "Okay, so if I apply leverage, I've got a broadsword. If I turn the sword round so that it's got so it's not going to snap or anything, can I use it as a lever to start the landslide?" And this is me saying, "Well, yeah, that's a really good. There's nothing in the adventure to say it can be done. There's nothing in the mechanics of D&D to say it can be done." But I dragged in the 5th edition rule here of advantage and disadvantage, and I gave him advantage by letting him roll 2d6 on every open doors check, because now he'd got leverage. And I think that's an example of just sort of making something up on the fly that the player has come up with as an intelligent and unplanned, in terms of the adventure and in my head, way of solving a challenge.
And John, your old school brain can still feel happy in using that 5th edition mechanic, because advantage disadvantage was kicked around as far back as OD&D. So it's an old school idea. you can maintain your purity.
Yeah. But I think that's sort of a approach of just dragging in mechanics from other games.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, before I had ever played a system with like luck points or anything, we had luck points in D&D, in AD&D. We pulled them. I think we pulled them inspired by maybe the Force points in Star Wars or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically they were a pool of points you had that allowed you a reroll, and that was it. It was just. It was a simple mechanic, and why not? We played a lot of fun, like epic style gaming with rules that weren't written for epic style gaming. So you had to make your characters more epic somehow. Actually, I think luck points in an AD&D context may have come from the Conan novel, the Conan Adventures.
They did,
yeah. That's actually because I got those because I was a huge Conan fan, like every other kid in the 80s.
I think
the player that came up with that idea got 20 bonus XP as well, because in that adventure they start at minus 500 and they get to 0 XP. Then they become first level. So that player got 20 bonus XP towards becoming first level.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like I've had players like ask me, "Well, we can't get the door open. Can we chip away at the old crusty stone around it?" Like they'll start asking me, like, "What kind of stone is it? We're in a cave. Is it limestone? Is it granite? Is it whatever?" And I'm like, "All right, well, can we start carving away around the door and just pull it out of the frame?" I'm like, "Okay, you're gonna make noise, but it's a way to get around."
If anyone's watched Seth Skorkowski talk about some of the things, and he talks about one of them, which is the player didn't say what he wanted to do, and they spent like 2 hours, and he says, what did you really want? I said, I just wanted to buy this. Why don't you tell me? And then
he's talking about when he goes to the town. He's like, "What's that building? What's that building? What's that building?"
Yes.
And he's like, and he gets all through all the buildings. He's like, "Oh, I was hoping there'd be a Bowyer Fletcher here because I wanted to buy some arrows.
I've seen that as well. Yes. yes.
Oh,
I've had players start a fire at the base of a wooden door and burn the door out if they couldn't force it open. It's like, okay, you're creating smoke, and you're gonna have to wait a while, but it's not gonna take long before you've compromised the door enough to where you can push it open.
I'm going to bring up you were just talking about that, which is the talking about obstacles. Look at the old 1E basic and opening doors, and the idea was, which always kind of bugged me,
Because all doors are stuck.
yes, all doors are generally stuck, number one, and then number two is they automatically close behind you.
Yeah.
I'm going,
They had some really weird arbitrary stuff. Like every other monster has infravision except for the party.
Oh, it gets better with the stuck doors because the assumption is the monsters, however, can open the doors freely.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's what
yeah.
that whole weird metaphysical dungeon as almost like a demi-plane rather than an actual physical place.
I actually came up with a little thing that I do. It's just a little chart I do whenever a party comes to a door. If it's a published module or something that hasn't specified the door, I just roll randomly. Okay, the door opens freely, or the door is stuck, or the door is locked. The door is locked and stuck. The door is locked, stuck, and trapped, or the door is just trapped, or whatever. So I have a little chart. Makes
The
it
door is
interesting.
an illusion.
The door is an illusion. Oh, I'm going to add that one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I always have a
Doors
problem
filled
with
with
reality
worms.
in my own brain too. Like when I'm dealing with medieval worlds, I'm like, stuff wasn't always made the best. And if it's been down in a dungeon and a party member comes up and goes, "Can I just force the lock on the door?" And I'm thinking, this lock's been here for like 300 years, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, if they're doing that, I'll have them do not an open doors check, and then if they succeed, I'll do a saving throw on the door to see if they smash it in.
I'm going
I had a
to
lot of fun ones in a dungeon. They're like, and you step on a pressure plate and you hear a click, and then nothing happens. And they're like, "What?" Yeah, you hear a click and then nothing happens. They're going through like 3 more rooms, and they're like wondering, what did we set off? And on their way out, they have happened to find the old, crusty, moldering, worm-eaten crossbow in the recess in the wall that was supposed to shoot them, but of course it's not functional anymore.
Sexius, you were saying something?
Oh god, I'm trying to think of like what it was
Sorry.
again. I got thrown off.
You're not old enough to have. What
No,
was that
but it's
song?
just I
Forgotten.
Elfbait continued talking, and I just went, okay, I'll come back to it later. And then, then I forgot what it was that I was trying to say.
You're not old enough to have dementia. That's the word.
No, it'll come quick enough. Trust me. I'll race you to it.
I was actually laughing more because I was worried that the Texas said he was going to head out. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Let's make sure that he doesn't just drop off, without us saying anything. But no,
I try to leave a note for that. No, I think I've done a couple of things where I have tried to sort of like misdirect the players by using illusions inside of dungeons, and I've also had. Oh no, wait! I remember now. At my work, we recently have one of our interns. He was given all the keys to our warehouse, every single one of them, all of the keys. And and he had to figure out which ones still work. And yes, so the point is that he's now come across several locks that are rusted so badly that he can't even put the keys into the locks themselves. And this is a building that's only 20, 25 years old, maybe 30, like 300 years. Yeah, no, like you're gonna come across some doors where it's just like, I want to pig it. It's like, you can't
But
get your
you
things
could probably
in there.
just tap it with the pommel of your sword and it'll fall apart.
Pretty much.
Well, I'm going to say this from my personal experience of going out in the field where, it's been rained on and everything else for these locks, and you have the combination and it works just fine, except the lock will not open. And so you don't know if you have the wrong combination
Or if
Or-
the tumblers have just slipped or whatever.
Well, and I've had it before where someone goes up there and says, "I have it there." I said, "Okay, let me just look at it," because I said sometimes there are weird things on how they do it, and you just like, I don't understand. And also it just goes pop on its own. You're like, all right, you know?
Yeah, you got to be careful being too realistic though, because next
I
thing
know.
you know, you're having all the player characters have to save versus disease every time they go in a dungeon to make sure they didn't get tetanus. You know?
Sorry, where's
You
the
know what?
problem again? Listen, if I can disease my players, that's a good day.
Movement effects are a great way to challenge your players too. Like when the dungeon is waist deep in water, and every time that they can't run fast, or it's muddy ground, or icy, or crusty, like I had in the other one, because that mineral filled like geothermal cave dungeon, I had so much fun. At like one room there was the floor, and then there was like a kind of a honeycombed crust of sulfur over the floor, so every time they stepped on it they had to like do a dex check, or like they would potentially catch their leg in the crusty floor. So
I mean, there's castles we can visit in Britain that are 700-800 years old, which some of the original doors are intact. I can't guarantee that the hinges are the original workings.
Yeah.
They've probably been restored, but these are massive things.
Yeah, well, thick slabs of wood as well.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, and I don't know about this, but I've seen several with churches where they've been lacquered and they've put resin on them, and so I think that was more in Eastern Europe for a lot of that. And so yeah, you look at it like, well, what's going to do this? Your fire's not going to do a darn thing to it. You just like
depends on the lacquer. It might go up extra good.
well,
just cast.
There's a reason Victorian houses were tinder boxes.
well,
Cast any form
oh,
of
yeah.
necrotic spell on the wood and just let it wither away.
Well, I mean, technically, if it's necrotic, it's already dead because someone cut it down.
Oh, come on! You can still decay it.
I know.
You can kill it more.
That's why when you go through the dungeon, you take time to bottle the oozes you encounter.
It occurs to me that we were earlier lambasting players for taking too long to talk about doors, and here we are talking about doors for.
Now, listen, I've been taking notes. I've been taking notes. I still like my idea of like, okay, just have the door slightly ajar, and if the players just go like, oh, okay, we'll just walk through here. Have a bucket of green slime. Down. Yeah, exactly. Like it's a wonderful way of teaching the players like, hi, welcome to the dungeon. It's all fun and games.
I guess it has to be a stone bucket because green slime will eat the wood.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm also thinking if you're going to be talking about some of these things, what about trappers and lurkers in rooms?
Trappers, lurkers, yep.
Mimics.
Rovers.
Spanners. If you remember the ones that are basically the relatives of the trappers and lurkers, but they look like a bridge.
Oh no, I don't remember those.
Oh yeah, that's a monster from I think Monster Manual 2 maybe. Can't remember, but yeah, or it could have even been in second edition. But yeah, it looks like a bridge, but when you get on it, it chucks you off the bridge and into the chasm, and then crawls down and eats you.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I made a reverse piercer.
Well, I do like what they did with 5e.
They sat there at the bottom of pits, and they exuded a gas that gave you vertigo.
Oh,
and so when you're trying to cross them, you'd fall on them. They're like piercers that adapted to laziness, screw climbing to the ceiling.
Well, what was the other one that they had that I really liked? I do like what 5e did with piercers and ropers, where they're related.
That's an old Dragon magazine article, actually, the ecology of the roper.
Yeah. I mean,
it's cool. Yeah. It's nice that it's canonized in the Monster Manual because that whole dungeon ecology kind of thing.
I used to love those in the old Dragon magazines whenever they had Elminster's whatever, ecology. I thought that those were great, and that's one of the things that I think that I've looking at some of the old stuff that was back then, and for the Dragon magazine, which I really enjoyed because it didn't seem as codified. It really made it fun to read some of those articles. Oh, well, that's how this works, and why does this work? Oh, okay. I really enjoyed those articles, and I wish they would. I wish that they had more stuff like that in the current editions.
You're creating symbiotic relationships between the various creatures.
It's a good point on challenging your players as monster variations.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I was going to bring up here, but Dave Mills says here the party can be the worst monster of all. I mean, the party can create their own challenges from time to time. Going back again to last Saturday's Call of Cthulhu game, when Gingerbeard's character found a load of seditious pamphlets in a printer's, that he knew that if the mob outside got hold of them, especially with the way they'd been amended with the blood of the deceased, that it would all kick off. So he started a fire in the basement of a printer's in a 18th century mid-town house in Paris. That place is going to go up. So I did sort of have the mob react very quickly to put the fire out, but that was a potential challenge created by one of the players trying to react to a challenge that was already placed in the adventure.
Oh yeah. Well, he did that, and then of course I grabbed whatever I found, and then I made sure I put them in my pockets so no one else saw things. And then when we got to the barracks, I threw them in. I threw those in the fire. But yes, yeah, that was. But those are the things that go into that. Speaking of which, I guess this comes back to swinging the spider goblin, which was at least. When you go down there and you find that horrible, which I can only say reminds me of the movie Descent hole that we found in the catacombs.
Yes.
And as I was just thinking, you just go down like, here, let me push you down. We didn't do that. It was like, no, we're not going in there.
Yeah, I love variant monsters though. They're just so fun. Like I have certain favorites. Like I have an ever-growing list of Umber Hulk variants.
Well, about variant monsters. I mean, Sean on his channel has got a video about probably the most infamous variant monster of the war, the Nilbog. Yes, the reverse goblin.
Yeah.
Yes, variant monsters are always interesting. And I guess that's why we got so many different types of troll by the end of first edition, because everyone had become familiar with the traditional troll. So the game designers were coming up with variants already to try and trick them,
especially with the trolls, because very few of them, I won't say none of them, very few of them seem to follow any of the patterns of like Norse folklore or anything like that. Yeah, I know that the D&D troll is not based on the Norse troll anyways, but they didn't even I think the closest they get is the giant two-headed troll. Is the most Norse version.
I'm going to say, if anyone, and I don't know how they did with the 5th edition. This is sometimes where having to recalculate all the XP for the monsters gets very frustrating. Is the Iron Kingdoms had the basic stats for the monsters, and then they had that were perfectly within the whole thing that went in there, and it started putting different things like lone. I think it was like lone wolf, alpha, hungry, diseased, starving, child, and it allowed you to just alter stats very quickly, so you could say, "Oh, I just put this template, and then I do these modifiers with these abilities, and I get effectively a whole new monster." So the players aren't sure exactly, they're like, oh, it's just a normal wolf, except it's an alpha wolf. That's
One of the nice things 3.5 did was the template. I think that the
Yeah.
template is something that should have carried forward. I mean, that's a great way to modify monsters. Like, you don't have to write 5,000 entries for skeleton. You just have to come up with the skeletal template, and any monster's a skeleton.
Yes.
Well, that sort of began with AD&D when you had monster zombies and things like that starting
They
to
have the
appear.
centaur mummy and Tomoichin, I think it is.
Yeah, and you've got and it was quite easy because of the simplicity of the way that monsters were written out in early editions. You could easily just have this sort of a little table of variations presented on a quarter of a page, and you've immediately got like 10 or 12 different variations in small columns.
It's always
different
easier
types.
to write old school monsters though, because they don't have a lot of rhyme or reason necessarily. You could just
No,
you literally can write whatever you want.
Well, this is the thing I've noticed, and I know this is probably why they kind of like it. Is that's where the 5e has taken the stuff really from 4, which is they said, well, we realized that we went too far with 4 and making it a dungeon board game, a Dungeons and Dragons board game. So they took some of that, and I said, boy, but since 5e requires so much in combat, whereas in 1e, okay, fine, you know what? It's the difference between like 50 or 60 XP. You spread it among, 6 players. They're not going to scream and yell usually if you miss them by 10 XP. But in this one, you have to recalculate everything, and that does make it harder for a DM that creates their own custom monster. And I think that's sometimes the whole the hard part for the dungeon master. And I know that what were they talking about last week? Well, we're having problems getting dungeon masters. Yeah, because it's not that much fun when I want to create my unique monster, and now I have to do all the calculations to figure out what CR and how many experience points.
That article is so skewed, anyways, because they're talking about professional dungeon masters.
They are and they are. They're specifically talking about one place and one style of playing.
Also within a particular community, by the sound of it. I mean, it was very much how did I put it when I was talking to somebody about it? Like very pseudo intellectual New Yorker problem as opposed to an actual gamer problem.
I think you have your average gaming group of friends around a table. I don't think there is a dungeon master shortage. It's just purely the idea that company is oversubscribed and it was a shill for that company's services.
No, I'm gonna bring up something else. They said Gen Con is having problems. We're talking about conventions are having problems getting dungeon masters as well.
I think that's more to do with the atmosphere in gaming, where they're putting quite a lot of pressure. It's not so much the rules of the game;
it's a minefield.
It has become a minefield. Yeah. How dungeon masters have to jump through hoops and make sure
you are one dissatisfied player away from getting banned from that convention.
Exactly. That's more of a community issue than a game rules issue.
Well, are we still on about whether or not we have enough DMs in the hobby?
In the hobby, yes. If you're an upscale New York player looking for a paid DM, no.
Well, because every so often I open up Roll20 and I just look at how many applications that there are for people to get into games, and it is incredible how many people are fighting for the attention of just getting a DM. Most of my perception of this is from the online sphere, where everyone is hawking on about that they need a DM, they want a DM, they want to find a group. So
I think it's a misread of the constant problem with D&D. D&D has always had more players than it has DMs, and the explosion in popularity has probably exacerbated that issue. But I think that an online play, of course, I think like anything else, has a tendency to concentrate and inflate the perception of those problems. Nothing is as bad as it seems like it is on Facebook.
Well, but I'm going to mention with Saxius here, since not all of us can get together to play with with friends, like, yeah, okay, there were like 4 of us willing to do the DMing things in my group, which always amazed me because my groups have always been somewhere between 70 and 80% of people who want to be DMs at some
same
point.
Same here.
Yeah, my groups too. Everybody wanted to run a campaign, and everybody wanted to play in the other guys' campaign, and the problem was time.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
that's exactly what we've got.
I'm
But-
the
but-
complete opposite. I've never been able to be in a group where there's other people that want to DM. I have always been the DM. I've always had to be in groups where people are going like, "Well, we want a game," and then crickets, and then crickets some more, and then finally I just go, "Well, fine, I'll DM then."
I'm there
It's
now.
taken-
I'm in that place
I mean-
now, like where I'm the only DM. But
It's taken time for me to. I mean, my players, my current group, some of them have been playing for 3 or 4 years before offering to DM, but that's just down to their own confidence and to get their own games. And I don't know if the fact that I've got a fairly big gaming background, they felt whether they'd felt a little bit under pressure when again with me there. And I've tried to get rid of that. That sort of fear as much as possible because I try and help them as much as I can. Both the guys in my group who've run, or three of the guys in my group now run games for me, and I've offered them help when they need it, and they know that they can get help from me. It's not always the best help, but the help is there. But I mean, I think going back to like Saxis's point about too many DMs on Roll20. I have to say, I have put up. When I first started getting back into DMing, I put up a few adverts to run games, but I was saying things like, "I want to run this," or "I'll run a game with this," and I got no interest at all. Players. I have a feeling that there is this idea certainly in the online community and DMs are a little bit walking on eggshells, but there is this idea that the DM is there to give the players the game that the players want. And I'm not that DM. I'll run a game that I enjoy first and foremost. And if there aren't the players there for it, so be it.
I'm going to bring up something that, we're looking at it, and to be fair, they're talking about 20% of their players are DMs. So there's a large group that comes out there, and maybe it's just the people I hang out with. So there's that aspect too, which is you tend to hang out with people that are like yourself. And some people, they want to come into a game, they don't want to think about it, and they just walk in. But then again, if you look at all of these popular YouTube channels, they're really all aimed at DMs. How do you DM better? How do you do monsters? How do you do this?
Yeah.
How do you do this? But the same token is, you have 12 to 15 people on right now, and Critical Role has 20,000 on a good Thursday.
That is true.
So there's and a lot of people want that experience, and if they're getting in there, I think that's what's going on. Yeah,
I think that the perception, I guess maybe we're getting off topic here, but the perception of what it takes to be a DM is super inflated nowadays too. Streaming has set that bar super high and unrealistic. And on Bandit's Keep, Daniel had done a video on the same article that everybody's been doing a video on, and I commented on there. I'm like, literally, it is being a DM is the simple act of wanting to do it. My start as a DM, and I'm been a forever DM. I, by chance, ran into D&D. I had known what it was, but never seen it in the wild. Was in a neighborhood I had moved out from the weekend. Visited an old friend. He had a box set. We opened it up, played it for a couple hours, completely wrong. And I went home so enamored with the game and the concept that I tried to rewrite D&D from memory.
Yeah.
Wrote my first adventure with a map and a bard song set to green sleeves that explained the origin of the dungeon and had my mom and my dad as my first 2 players. So it's that easy, literally, to be a DM, but the perception is so people think you have to be a storyteller and a creator of worlds, and like, no, you just have to be an 8-year-old kid who knows some popular folk songs and can set a new set of lyrics to them,
And the simple
and a set of
fact is,
Crayola markers.
the simple fact is, I mean, you can have a very average DM running a game for a group of players that the players absolutely love. If we were to then observe that game from the outside, such as, I mean, if it was to be streamed or whatever, it would probably look painful to most of the viewers, but the people in the game would be thoroughly enjoying it.
I'm going to just tie off on this. I think people forget. Most people are desperate to be players. I mean, especially DMs. As much as we go through this, well, I want to be a DM. I want to be this. As much as we want to be a DM, there are times you're like, oh, I'd love to play games. Like my friend did that. He's like, oh, I want to be a player sometimes. I said, okay, that's fine. I'll run a game. I'll be in your game, and then I'll run a different game. I think players are incredibly forgiving. That's what gets me. Players are incredibly forgiving of DMs because they don't want to do it.
And also, once the fun starts rolling, nobody cares.
No, quite exactly.
You're all just having fun. You're eating pizza, you're drinking the soda or the beer of the day, you're making farting dick jokes, and you're having fun playing, doing a dungeon crawl. And that's not even just the 8-year-olds.
That's partly the point of what I was saying about the people in the group. It doesn't have to be the slickest of run games, but the people that are there will be thoroughly enjoying it because you're there with mates having a good time. I mean, I still wanted to have a go at running a game online and see how it comes across on a stream, and I'm getting the impression that I am a half decent deer. I used to think I was mediocre. I'm half decent deer, but it'll probably come across terrible on an online stream. Probably be painful to watch for people watching from the outside. But I'd still enjoy the game, and the people who are playing it will almost certainly enjoy the game. But that's the way it is.
So I'm gonna talking about games for this, and I guess that's what's the biggest thing is how about keeping the players together. And I don't mean within the game. I don't mean within the game. I mean just having the party come in every week to show up and play a game.
Or on the topic of challenges, that is a challenge.
That's probably the biggest challenge I have. It's not that people don't want to play; it's just like real life. But no, John, for this, and I'll mention this, and I think some people forget because they look at everything like Critical Role. Most games I watch are very painful, even when they're done pretty well. And I would have a blast to be in. Yeah. I can't. One is that things go slow, and the other part is, and this is why when people look at Critical Role, you've got professional voice actors all playing a game, and I'm going to mention just first. The newer
who have all also agreed that to make a fun game. Yes. That's the other thing.
Well, they know they're presenting. It's not just we're playing. They are.
And I think you have to concede as a group of players and a DM that you're going to have fun. I'm going
to mention this before, which was the first season or so. You could tell it wasn't overly scripted. You could tell a lot of these things that it was kind of going out there, and they were having fun. But I noticed that in the later seasons, it feels far too scripted, and it's not as fun for me to watch. I couldn't take more than about 50 episodes or so, to be fair. But and I don't mean second. I mean just in the first one. I'm like, oh, okay. But I what type of game do you want to play? And I noticed it was more fun watching some of the Alien games because they were real short, they were very tight, and the players were having more fun, I think, than the ones that were playing less serious games like D&D and things, because they were laughing to break up the tension because they knew they're probably not going to survive. Same thing with the Call of Cthulhu, John. Gingerbeard makes the game so much fun. the player is what really makes it worth. And when he was doing the forget me not, just all of the one-liners he was coming up with, and the playing of I forgot who the other gentleman was. That was great. That was fun for me to listen to, even though I'm doing other stuff in the background. Because I said, well, I'm not playing yet. They don't need me. So I was reading books and stuff. But I still love listening to them.
And I think he's doing the same with the Reign of Terror game. And I think he'll come into it even more in the next session. I like the way Gingerbeard plays. If I was going to run a game online and have it streamed, I'd certainly want Gingerbeard in the group, because I think he's the sort of player who would make that sort of game potentially, if it's ever going to be interesting for people to watch. Having someone like Gingerbeard there is the sort of person who will make it interesting. Hello, Gingerbeard, if you're paying attention. Yes, we're talking about you. Anyway, shall we get back to the topic of challenges?
Sure.
We were talking
Staying on
about challenge
topic
of finding a DM, so we were on topic.
Staying on topic is a challenge.
Yeah.
But,
yes.
One last note on how hard it is to be a DM. My buddy's first campaign was literally him listening to the lyrics on Power Slave by Iron Maiden and deciding that it would make a good D&D campaign. That was his very first campaign he ever ran. And we had a wild time with it, and it was fun. And it probably sucked, just like my very first adventure was probably ridiculous.
Yeah,
but my parents humored me, and I went on to play the game forever. So
the quick starters that have come out have gotten so much better that are free. If you want to if you just want to play a different game system every week or two, you never have to buy an RPG book ever. They've gotten very good.
That is one of the best starter sets for any game system I've ever seen. There's so much in that, in terms of quick starters and stuff. Anyhow, where was we?
Trying to stay on topic and failing miserably.
Well, it's past 5 o'clock, isn't it? Yep.
It's
past
6:20. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Right. I did have some notes.
Bullet points, man.
Well,
With those bullet points.
Well, we've done the challenges of monsters. We've done traps and puzzles. We've done sort of physical environment and obstacles and stuff. One thing we haven't really done.
Have we done social? Social
I'm looking
challenges?
down at this that Omen I'll put in Discord here. The social encounters. Challenges in social encounters.
Well, I find
quite.
Sorry, go on.
No, go on, Sean.
I was going to say, I find a lot of players, when you can assign your stats, they create their own problems by dump statting charisma. So as a DM,
Oh my god, no!
if you just use the charisma, the reactions and whatnot, the challenge will come fast and furious.
Oh god, yeah, they will. This is why I love just putting the higher stats into charisma. Like, someone's got to be the face of the group, and in my experience, at least, most groups doesn't want to be the face. Very few people want to be the face. But someone will reluctantly go like, well, I guess I have to, and then just rely on skills and roles and anything else to just not be at the front. Socially, that is.
What's funny about that is as a player, they're like, well, you see 3 bandits, and you're like, well, first off, we haven't attacked them. They haven't attacked us. And I'm not saying that they're good or bad. I'm just like, okay. And I've gone up, and I said, all right, we're going to have the rest of the party go all around. And then I would come up to talk to them. And, of course, I was playing a big, heavy fighter. And going, you really don't want to get into a fight with us. But I was trying to be the charismatic one. But I enjoy social encounters. I don't like it where I think Elfbait was talking about, when we're talking about good villains, and they just pull out the bow and start shooting. That's not fun for me as the DM. That's not really fun for the players in certain ways either. So,
like my last session was mostly role playing with 3 ghosts. I love social encounters.
Yeah.
It's an excuse for me to do funny voices and characters, and it's a nice break from the fighting. Which can get pretty linear at times.
No, in my first Dead game, I was showing, or I think I mentioned this before on a previous stream, but I was showing one of the players is running a paladin, and I was just showing him the list of modifiers. It's not just his charisma, but it's the racial preference. He's a lawful good dealing with other humans. There's another 15% right onto his chart, and when we looked at it, he was something like plus 70% on most social situations. He was like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
Even if I roll a 0-1 on the percentage, because First Ed uses percentage for charisma modifiers, he has a minimum 71, which is always a positive result.
Well, you'll be pleased to know, Sean, that on Monday night, I broke open that table and used it as presented probably for the first time in years. I've just tended to wing it in the past, but I thought I'll use it.
Take a look. Yeah, it's fantastic. There's some great little nuances in there that make the difference.
I had a player in my current 5e game who's relatively new to gaming, and I think he is new to gaming with 5e. In fact, it's still the only thing he plays. But I pulled morale out in an encounter, and he's like, "Wait a minute, that's a thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's a thing." It is. It's a thing in the 5e DMG actually, but
yeah, it's not very good. It's a wisdom saving throw, which is completely bonkers.
I think there's a point to be made here. I think because there's a bit of to it and throwing in chat, but I'm saying I think there's a point to be made here that any encounter can become a social encounter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Any encounter with anything living can become a social encounter.
And
I don't know. We role played with 3 ghosts. They don't have to be alive.
True.
Anything
sentient,
sentient. Yeah, anything sentient, because I have had the fun moment of a wizard doing summon monster, getting some ants, giving them the initial command of what they had to do, and then trying to give further commands to the ants, realizing he couldn't communicate with insectoids.
I do remember the ranger negotiating with the quippers on how to get through the water with using the speak with animals. Yeah, they're like, "We just killed some guy. We just killed these hook horrors back there. If we drag their bodies up here and throw them in the pool for you to eat, will you let us pass?" And they're like, "That's a lot of food. Normally we have to wait for some lizard or something to fall off a wall." Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, bit of bribery gets you everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to figure out what you can bribe a quipper with, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know about you all, but I like to play like what I read in books and things, and it's those social aspects where they throw the quips around, talking with Smog. That's one of the things okay, we can fight you later, but let's have a talk right now, maybe I'll find something out. But I agree.
Yeah.
And talking about one, I do like the basic just roll the morale check, and they have morale next to the monsters, which makes it really easy.
I actually, 1E morale is my favorite, because most of the other systems, even other D&D, they have a morale rating of the monster, but 1E has a formula that applies to all monsters, right? So that makes it so much easier, because I don't have to reference it. It's like I just have to look at what the monster is.
I think I prefer basic D&D there, where it's just got a simple morale. Typically,
everything
6,
has the rating.
7, 8, or 9. Yeah.
And
I like having the
that's
formula.
beautiful, I think that social encounters, I think it's very clear, and this is one of those arguments I throw out when people are like, "Oh, the old school was blah," and they throw out some inaccurate representation. I'm like, from the very day the game started, it was never intended that you were going to fight through every encounter. No. I mean, it's social encounters have been baked into the game since pretty much its earliest versions.
Yes.
And for 1E, fighting didn't get you the most XP. It was the gold.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's
true.
That's true in OSE as well, like basic BXD.
Yeah.
My game last night that I play in, I'm not running this one. We encountered 3 whites, and One guy got level drained, but we got the whites because we had holy water and we just splashed the hell out of them. And when the DM calculated the XP, it was like everybody gets 20 XP.
Hey,
Yeah,
I mean, one thing. I mean, we were discussing this in a Discord the other day, Omanal. I think the way that players approach challenges can often be determined by how XP is awarded in. And as you say, if XP is awarded for, if the DM is sensible and awards XP properly for overcoming an encounter, not just killing monsters, then that will make players think very differently about how they approach the challenge of the encounter. And certainly, if there's XP for gold, that adds a different way of approaching a challenge. When I run 5th edition, I've pretty much tripled the XP requirements for all the levels. I've changed some of it's triple at lower levels, and then it's different as it goes up to the higher levels. So I want them to spend longer at levels 5, 6, 7, 8 because to be honest, I don't want to run 5e much higher than that. I think the game falls apart. I much prefer it at low levels. But I'm at the stage now. I'd rather run 1st edition, 2nd edition, or Call of Cthulhu. But if I am running 5th edition, I want it to be at lower levels. But I give pretty much even XP for monsters, gold, and plot points and solving encounters in an interesting way. There's about a third for each, and that gives the players a lot more freedom and flexibility in terms of advancing their characters and solving encounters in the way that in more creative ways.
Yeah. And
get rewarded for it.
I've always run XP for dealing with an encounter.
Yes.
That same player I mentioned about, the new guy, we had that happen. I'm giving out experience, and he's like, and I'm like, oh, and you guys got past the such and such. He's like, wait, we get experience for that? I'm like, you defeated the encounter.
Yeah.
You dealt with that challenge. There you go.
Yeah, you got around it. It's you are hurting your game and your fun, in my opinion, if you limit it to just combat.
I mean, when I won't say I did it that way when I was a kid. I certainly didn't. As a kid, you had to kill the monsters, take the treasure. I was very limited when I was winning when I was young, but that's me 12, 13, 14 years old. But certainly nowadays, looking back, I think it's the constructive and the mature approach to running a game to make sure that players have that ability to approach things in different ways.
Absolutely.
Well, now that you've brought up maturity, I mean, shoot, now we're out. Like that's it for me.
Well, a lot of it is what are we going to do to have fun, and what makes things fun? So whenever we talk about obstacles, there are obstacles that players, want to talk about, them being their own worst enemy. Man, if they're not having fun in your obstacle and thing, at a certain point, you're just going, yeah, this isn't going a good direction. Everyone's not having a fun time. What just stop and figure out what's going on.
Well, there's always the Colvillian, orcs attack, right? Things are slowing down, and
Well, that's one of the things that I do like about some other systems. And to be fair, you've been sucking me into trying to look at RuneQuest. I'm not sure how I feel about the system as a whole. But there's a lot of really good aspects into it. I think the problem is that it takes so long to make a character and combat's super deadly that it makes me go, is this a system I really want to run?
Well, like Call of Cthulhu, you're not really supposed to be getting into fights. Although I'm really irritated that the newest version of RuneQuest did not update to the 7th edition Call of Cthulhu standards, which is annoying.
I don't know.
Because now they exist on 2 different levels. The 7th edition Call of Cthulhu, the Chaosium system, is in my opinion, the best version of it. The resistance table alone is enough of a reason to The cool thing is, if you've got RuneQuest at 6th edition, you can do it in your head to bring it up to 7th edition standards. That's because 7th edition is completely backwards compatible. Truly backwards compatible. Anyways, another note on social encounters: it does not have to be necessarily even be sentient to do a fun social or non-combat resolution to a monster encounter. For example, you run into the owlbear and the party member pulls out some rations. Hey boy, who's hungry? Does the whole lure fetch thing. You could do that. Leading the goat to the wyvern's lair to lure it out so you can sneak in and save the person.
Well,
Yeah, fair enough.
You talk about social encounters. We'll talk about things that are done in books. Go look at the social that would have been a social encounter of the Hobbit and the Troll with the when they all catch them together and they
keep them talking until sunlight hits. Yeah.
Yes. It's like, okay, these are well beyond your level, so they don't necessarily have to kill you at this moment. But I think that's a big factor for there. And there's a lot of stories that way where it's like, we're going to kill you, just not quite yet. And then the players are supposed to, okay, let's talk a little bit and give us some time, like Odysseus, until the Cyclops.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that Gollum could have torn Bilbo to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a really long social encounter where they have the riddling game.
Yeah.
Well, and he was still afraid.
Even Smog was a social encounter until things went wrong. I mean, seriously, that was a party member.
Yeah.
Playing it out as a social encounter and rolling a really bad roll, or just telling the DM he said the wrong thing.
Kept him talking. That's a really good roll for a while there.
Well. No. I mean, no. You have to look at
the problem is that the rest of the dwarves weren't sneaking in behind the dragon, going.
Yeah. well. No. You have to look at it this way. Smog got a very good roll because he figured out the riddles. That's what it really came down to. Because, but that's the other part is when you start making dragons, boy, it makes them a lot more interesting when you make them intelligent and sit there and like, and that's the other part is you're making memorable encounters for the players by including those social interactions. We went to the king. It wasn't like, you just go do this and you go wander off, or the barmaid, or the, or especially whenever you get rumors. That's one thing I really miss about the old editions is, boy, they just threw rumors all in there, just assuming that some of them were going to be wrong and some of them were going to be correct. Some of them were going to be correct and some of them were partially true. And it sent players into wild goose chases and.
I love throwing like roadside encounters at my players. A lot of the random encounters they run into while they're traveling are just role playing stuff. Some itinerant monk or a merchant on his way to town.
Yeah, and those are great. Like a good reaction, even on something seemingly innocuous, can get you information.
Yep. And they also tend to come back to the players too. Like if they do goodwill on the road and stuff, like that merchant, when they come back to town and they run into him in the inn, he's like, "Oh, my friends, come, thank you. You can see I made it. Thanks for fixing my cart."
It's Saxius's bedtime, so I'm going to say thank you.
Sorry, I'm off. Thanks,
Thank
gentlemen.
you, Saxius. Cheers, Saxius.
Cheers. Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Good night.
So here's something sort of on the topic of the social encounters, but it's also a bit of a carryover from our villain discussion a few weeks back. I forgot to bring it up. Would any of you actually, quote unquote, Negan a player character? If you're familiar with The Walking Dead, when the villain Negan shows up, he's got all the heroes in a lineup, and he says, "I got to kill one of you to make an example." Would you outright kill a player character? Yeah, well, obviously it depends, but I'm thinking, would you do it though? If they were in a situation they put themselves in, not like obviously starting a campaign, they're in a lineup, here you're dead, but if they've put themselves in a situation where and it's all by natural organic process, the villain's in front of them, something like, if you lip me off again, one of you dies, right?
Yes.
And players, of course, who players that will always lip off the dungeon master and all the NPCs. Would you actually do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because and here's the reason is, and I don't feel guilty about it. Are you sure you want to do that? I say that.
Are
all
you
the time.
sure?
Or even if it's describing how and Negan looks at you and raises a brow like, are you serious?
Now, here's the reason: is I've gotten so tired of, like, I saw one player do this. We were captured in a jail. Okay, not a huge deal, and he decides to play the Three Stooges. I'm invisible. I'm going to do this, and he pokes and stuff. And I said, look, that's not the kind of game I want. Now, that's fine if I want to play a Laurel and Hardy game, but I kind of want mine a little bit more serious. I'd say, okay, they're going to stab through the bars. They're going to kill you. Please roll a new character. And one is it sets the expectation for all the other players to know this was what's going to happen if you weren't careful with your words. And then number two is, hey, I warned you. Is this what you really want to do? I don't know why the world players still do it whenever the GM says, are you sure? Anyway, that's my view on it. I don't like doing it just because they did everything right. I do it because they're really acting kind of out of character, just so they can, well, you're not going to really do this to me. All right.
I think on the topic of the social stuff too, if we can stick there for a moment, the monsters or the encounters can initiate them too. I mean, it's not always the players going, Parlay, can we talk to you? I mean, you can literally have the players ready to say, like, confronted by the city guard, and they're gonna throw down the guard captain's like, look around you. Where are you? You're in the middle of Waterdeep. Where are you going to go that we can't find you?
Our lowliest guard is a 5th level warrior. Take your pick of what you want to do.
Yeah, it's like I've that orc king. Yes, you've got him dead to rights, but the number of appearing in that orc layer is what, 30 to 300. Are you ready to take on the rest of them?
I'm going to bring up something in here because we're talking about some of this, and everyone, for the most part, tends to do. And I've probably been reading way too much John Carter of Mars and Conan and things like that, where they get captured, and in almost all cases they're knocked unconscious. And kind of my view is, instead of killing off players, because I like to make players suffer, I guess is the best way. Instead of characters dying, I would rather say, I know that characters will generally try fighting to the death. It just seems to be natural. Instead of saying, I'm going to surrender, they're like, we're going to fight to the death. Well, I don't have to kill you, but I can knock you out. And then you're going to find yourself waking up in a dungeon. I would much rather do that in many cases.
Yes.
Made it quite clear that subdual damage is a thing in the game. You can declare that you're doing subdual damage and that the bad guys do it too. Like, if my party would have fallen to the more intelligent members of the Orcus party, they would have, of the Orcus cult, they would have been in the cells, lined up for sacrifice. They weren't going to just be dead. I mean, it's one thing if the zombies kill them, but
and I was going to say something, I can't remember what it was. Oh, old man brain.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Yeah.
No, that was Saxius. No.
No, there was something I was going to say that was related to villains and social encounters. I mean, I've got several Call of Cthulhu adventures where essentially, in order for the party to succeed, one of them has to choose to sacrifice themselves. I know Call of Cthulhu is different to D&D in that sense.
Yeah, it's more of a role-playing game overall, man.
Yeah.
In general.
That doesn't mean it can't work or shouldn't work in D&D.
No, yeah.
No, those are one-shots, aren't they, John?
I've always
not always.
Really...
Okay.
Always.
No. Well, no. I mean, those scenarios. Most of them are, I believe, one-shots.
Yeah, generally that sort of thing it tends to be in a one-shot, but there are a few sort of campaigns which have got that option in there.
I always find it amusing when I run into old schoolers who are like, back in the day, we didn't do all these roll. I'm like, you didn't? Ever since the dawn of playing the game, I've been like going entire sessions where all we're doing is role playing. It's like,
I can't say we did that I can't say we did that when we were kids, but certainly, since I've been back in the hobby, it's been quite common.
and that might just be because me and my players, but we were all down for it. We were all down for talking through encounters and interacting. I was raised in a very storytelling family. My grandmother was a master ghost storyteller, and you know, I got writers in the family, and I was raised on Grimm's fairy tales and stuff. But told to me by my German grandma. But and so that may just have come natural. But yeah, I mean, my players, I don't think I've ever had. I mean, there may have been one player in a group who was like, "Come on, can we just kill the ogre?" Yeah, but that was also a player who probably wasn't into it as much. I mean, well, he was into it. He loved playing D&D, but he was, that was his player type. But the rest of us were like, our characters had aspirations, and we were out negotiating with other kingdoms once we got to that domain level play, and it was we were totally up for it. So it seems kind of weird that people are always like, it's all about combat. I'm like, no.
I'm going to agree with Grumpy Old Slam. When we were young, that is true.
Yeah.
But I think that was part of what it really attracted me to. And this, to be fair, that's one of the things that happened with Ravenloft. Or should I go up? But by the time you got Vampire the Masquerade, that's almost all social with very minimal combat. And it's really Call of Cthulhu is very similar in that because you want to avoid combat as much as possible. But there is some.
It's funny. I mean, with Vampire the Masquerade, it was so not combat that when they wrote combat rules into it, nobody knew how they worked, and I used to abuse the crap out of them. At the time, I was playing in an online text-based environment that was a Cyberpunk World of Darkness mashup, and I played a human cyborg, and it was ridiculous because you get these characters who are playing supernatural characters, and they're used to being like, "I'm immune to guns." I'm like, have you read the firearms rules in the new player's book? Well, yeah. I'm like, I've got a 12 gauge shotgun. I have 8 automatic successes. No, that's just 8 dice. I'm like, no, a base of 8 successes. And they're like, they call the referees in, and the referees are like, that's the rules. And I'm like, so I'm just out there with my 12 die firearms pool because of my wired reflexes and my targeting computer because I'm a cyborg, and I'm just obliterating supernatural creatures with a Spaz 12, which isn't even a cyberpunk gun.
It definitely.
It's a game that was broken by its own combat system is the point I'm trying to make, because it was so not combat that when they put combat into it, that if you understood the combat rules, they were just horrible.
Well, and they kept on trying to update every edition, and it just seemed to make it worse. But I really did enjoy, talk about social encounters. That was one in there. And you want to talk about saying the wrong thing? You don't say that in front of the prince, in front of the whole, the Primogen and everyone else, because that ruined you in the other part, and then you might have people come after you in the dark, and then you also had to be careful of covering your tracks because you didn't want the vampire hunters to come after you. I definitely was going through there.
To players out there, I will say that being willing to actually role play with your DM and not be a jerk and want to kill everything can pay off. In that same World of Darkness game, they had a built-in way to deal with problem players. They had pretty much an OP cybersecurity force called MetSec. And if anybody got out of hand, MetSec would just show up and obliterate your character, all the characters who were involved with Gatling guns and everything else, true cyberpunk fashion. Sure. So my character ends up caught in a park without a social security number because he was sinless and carrying firearms. And so I'm going through this, I'm role playing this scene out instead of just being a dick like so many people were when they would get confronted by MetSec. And I got one of the guys messaging me. He's like, dude, the only reason you're alive is because everybody's having such an absolutely awesome time role playing with you. And so my character, instead of getting killed or sent off to the Death Valley Free Prison, which was an entire sub server that was its own self-contained role-playing environment of Road Warrior, I I got sent to a cell, and then I got called into the head of the MetSex department and went through this big role-playing scene, and he's like, and slide something across the counter to my character. I'm like, what's this? He's like, welcome back to the land of the living. And I'm like, so he types, because text basically is like, you look down and it's your social security reinstated. I'm like, he's like, because my character had been declared dead. And so he's like, welcome back to the land of the living. And all because I wasn't a dick and role played through the scene instead of trying to, argue with the player, with the DM, or, try and fight my way through.
the game that sort of based itself entirely around not being a dick to the DM was Paranoia.
Yeah.
No.
No experience with Paranoia, but
I tried playing Paranoia, but the DM was always going to be a dick to you. So the point was, you could be a dick to the DM. You just had to make sure it was funny. As long as
the DM would probably laugh and then kill you anyway.
Only if it was funny. Was the whole point of it, is you had to be funnier than the person next to you that you're coming after.
Well, true.
That was the big thing with that. But what you couldn't do is you couldn't argue rules or anything else with them. That was the automatic death sentence. So
yeah,
but those are things that I really like about these. Is that to me, you have to add all these different challenges. So, if you just want to do a hack and slash game, that's fine. That's what we did as a kid. We went in, we said, "Oh, we did this. Oh, okay, yep." We moved forward. Which actually, to be fair, remind me a lot of the old SSI games when you went through with the D&D SSI games from the mid '80s or so. But
the gold box games for computers.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about super deadly for that? All your characters tend to die off, and you didn't have any hirelings. Like, what the hell?
We had maybe this is why we were good with doing a lot of role play. We created a D&D light that we played. We called it Geomorphs because it used the dungeon Geomorphs. We had easy access, and they're relatively inexpensive to just go buy, pads of dungeon, booklets of the dungeon Geomorphs. You remember those? I think for the older players, they were just books of blank maps that you could then fit together.
Oh yeah.
In the blue, and we would go through. One person would sit there and stalk the dungeon by writing little marks on the Geomorph. And that's how we got our hack and slash fix. We would then make characters and just go through with the map on the table, almost like a board game. And that was you instead, if you weren't feeling up for D&D, it's like, dude, you want to get together on Saturday and do Geomorphs? Shoot, cool. And then we'd go do Geomorphs for a couple of hours and get our bloodlust out of our system. And then go.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the ways of playing an RPG. I mean,
that's how I played. The first one I ever played is wrong. My buddy and I didn't understand that the players weren't supposed to see the map, and you were supposed to have a DM. So we just opened up the Caves of Chaos and read the room descriptions as we went into each one of them.
Yeah, well, why not? And if it's only just the two of you, why not play that way?
Yeah,
it's and it depends. A lot depends on your first experience with the game. I mean, that was your first experience. You probably didn't know any better, really. In terms
we didn't. I mean, he had gotten the box as a gift, and I knew D&D by reputation. I had never seen it. I'd seen the sixth graders walking around with AD&D books under their arms at school, and kind of, ooh, those books look neat.
Yes,
and
the big demon.
I think I got into miniatures before I got into actually playing any of the games, because the older kids and I would go down to the local hobby shop, huge hobby shop, American Eagles. That was a model shop and a game store, and they had every miniature made by anybody at the time. All the way from the display cases full of pewter naked ladies and down to heritage and Martian medals and all that stuff. And so we were into that. And then we had adult gamers in our life. We had this dude he was a computer technician for the city of Seattle, and he's like, "You want to come over this weekend and play D&D?"
Yeah, I've never had any of that. It was all my gaming group were all the same age, spotty 12 and 13-year-old boys.
Well, I mean, our group was the same age, but we had mentor gamers, I guess, is what I'm saying.
We didn't have a mentor to learn from. That's the thing.
Well, I was playing in Germany. We had the teenagers, and then we had those young whippersnapper kids, and they would just tell us, "You're doing it wrong," and then of course they wouldn't play with us. But it doesn't. but they would bring up things that, in retrospect, like, oh, okay. There was a lot of my babysitters that would come over, and we'd talk about some of this stuff too. So, but yeah, I admit there's. I guess, do we have anything else left in the list there?
I don't think so. No.
We reached the free talk part of the stream.
Well, I know John's got to leave in like 10 minutes, so that's why. So I just want to make sure. Speaking of some things, which is, what is your favorite obstacle? Or not obstacle. What is your favorite? I want to say obstacle. What is your? I guess what we would say is a challenge for your players. And it could be a certain trap, it can be a certain monster, it can be anything.
How about a category?
Categories work too.
Yeah, as I say, specifics are kind of tricky, and there's probably been way more than I can remember. But I love social encounters. I mean, I really do. I mean, I also but if a close second would be environmental hazards and obstacles instead of traps. I mean, I don't have anything against traps, but I feel that a lot of cases, obstacles and hazards make more sense and create a more believable world instead of traps.
I'm going to come up with a specific encounter from a specific module that has always intrigued me. And that, if anyone's played it, is the final encounter in S4 Lost Caverns of Sargekanth. Have any ever played that module?
Nope.
I've read the module.
Yeah. I read it 30 years ago. I don't remember what was in it.
I think we started it back in the day.
I've only just learned how to pronounce Sargekanth, so
I might be pronouncing it completely wrong. I'm just gonna.
No, Sargekanth is correct.
No. I remember the. I remember the look of the module front. I just don't remember.
Round module, Errol Otis, Art of a Bahir.
Yeah, Andrew Houston has it there. The challenge for players remembering what happened earlier in the adventure or in previous adventures. Learning to take notes. That's their challenge.
I'm just going to find my copy of the module so I can show you the picture of the encounter.
The digital gaming has really killed retention for players in my experience because nobody's writing stuff down.
Yeah.
You know what? That was the one thing I went through that I was so used to as a kid. Is I used to be the guy who mapped everything. And nowadays, like when John was going through there and we were going through the catacombs, I went, I'm not mapping this. And I said, well, wait a minute. My character wouldn't be mapping either. So I shouldn't be doing that.
There he is.
Yeah.
Wasn't
that the vampire lady, right?
That's the vampire that everybody dies to trying to hit on her. Or Sleeping Beauty here.
Right, that encounter, it combines it's potentially got a bit of social to start with, because obviously she's a gorgeous looking sleeping woman. But the room she is in is a globe. And she's inside the globe. And you come in on a platform halfway up the side.
Yeah, in those two little screened viewing areas, yeah.
Yep. And she's wearing slippers of spider climbing, so she can move freely around the walls. Whereas the players...
vampires have spider climb naturally in the game? In AD&D? But anyways, I'm sorry, I'm being too
I don't think they do.
Go for it. Finish the description, I'm sorry.
might be seconded, but I know at least one version of D&D that have spider climb.
I'm sure they haven't in AD&D because she's specifically wearing slippers of spider climbing. She's got a particularly nasty weapon. She's a really challenging foe to fight anyway. But the environment you're inside a globe, so it's got environmental difficulties because you've got to try and negotiate the fact that you're going to slide down these walls, otherwise you're stuck on this platform, and she's got free movement. So it's a challenging fight. It's potentially got a social introduction. It's a challenging environment, and then.
And a very interesting opponent. She herself is cool because she's a leveled vampire, isn't she? She's like a vampire with class levels.
Yeah, she's a level 13 fighter as well as being a
Oh,
vampire.
geez. And this was
so
a 5th through 7th, or what was the...
It's level 6 to 10, so it is quite high level.
Yeah, so you should have a party of like, probably 7 to 8th level people when you get there.
And she's fighting with strength of 1876, and she's using a chaotic evil bastard sword +4 with a purpose to slay lawful good clerics. And it paralyzes any clerics any such cleric it touches. But in addition to that, there's tons and tons of treasure in there. But there are 2 other creatures that are let loose by interfering with the treasure. And you fight them, and they explode when you kill them. And if you happen to have them both in the room at the same time, one's positive material, the other's negative material, and they will cause a bigger explosion. There's 2 of them. Which has the potential,
the antimatter explosion.
Yeah, which has the potential of destroying loads of the treasure. And when my players fought them, the Cavalier was basically left pretty much stark naked because his armor failed its saving throw. That lovely suit of full plate armor that he was wearing was blasted to smithereens, and that whole encounter. It's a big meaty encounter, but the whole thing is a brilliant challenge from start to finish.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a very clever one.
I got two for you. One is I like ordinary weather, right? Like I use the Wilderness Survival Guide. I love the weather charts and the weather effects. And players get caught in a tornado and they're getting bounced around. They gotta cling to trees and stuff, or they're dealing with wind chill in the winter. And they've have to abort trips because they thought, we'll travel through the winter. It's not a big deal. And they're an hour out of town and suffering from frostbite, losing all their hit points so that they can go back. So I love that. That's a good challenge because that's real. That's adventure. But the other thing I said it before, I like when players sort of challenge themselves. They get into a fight, they go Nova, they use up all their resources, all their spells, and that's only part 1 of 2. Next thing you know, they've got another round of enemies coming after them, and they're exhausted because they've used everything up. I love when they do that, and that's on them.
Yeah. I have to agree. My favorites, of course, are the typical. I love environmental effects. I don't care what kind of environmental effects and weather, but it forces players to think. And now, to be fair, I like more kind of survival games where your biggest threat is not necessarily the monsters. That may be why you went into the desert, to avoid getting killed by them. But then the desert itself is your bigger opponent.
It's your enemy, yeah.
And then players have to start thinking through this, especially if you have to go through mountains and things like that, or chasms. Well, how do we cross this? How do we do that? I really do enjoy those aspects. But then to be fair, I really love the social encounters with your villains. I want your villains to be charming. I want the players to hate them. I want them to go over and yes, we want to come after him next time.
Then you've got next session of Reign of Terror to look forward to, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, well, what's funny is what's funny is that vampire that you're talking about. No, it's the vampire you're kind of talking about is not the one that really bugs me. It's the fat doctor who's sitting there. That's the one who I'd really like to see his comeuppance.
The one who was trying to get you to shoot the peasants.
Yeah, the one I gave him the unloaded gun and said he could do it himself. Yes. which of course just made, that was to humiliate him. Like, you want to do it? You do it yourself. Here you go. Yeah.
Sergeant, deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Here, that was my favorite part of doing that, is humiliating that fat bastard.
Oh, poor old Dr. Ego. He's got a lot on his plate.
So someone didn't follow the Hippocratic Oath. I mean, come on.
He's trying to look at the bigger picture. He's trying to look at the whole city, trying to look at the whole city's health as a whole, and a few peasants can die along the way.
All right. Well, you know what? You're not following the Hippocratic Oath to me. Keep on going. You're fat. Well, how about this? If you're fat while everyone else is starving, maybe you can go on a diet just a little bit.
Anyway, I'm going to drag this stream to a close because we are at the midnight hour, and if all this talk about Reign of Terror has intrigued anybody, there are three characters available for next session, which will be first week of January, and you're more than welcome to come along and join in and be part of Omanal's team and Slan's team, because Slan's playing in that as well, and so is Gingerbeard. And as we've said, Gingerbeard's a good role player. Gingerbeard is someone who you do want to get role playing with, because he really does have his moments.
Oh, he's hilarious, regardless of whether he thinks he's a great role player. Just the things that comes out of his mouth makes it well worth Gingerbeard.
But as a trio, I think you worked pretty well. So that's good, and it's glad that you all enjoyed the game as well. So yes, and there are 3 characters available for that, and we might get it finished next session. It might be 2 sessions. It depends how you go. But that is what the Discord is there for now, and I'm going to open it up as well so that other people can run games in there if they want to. Just request a channel and I'll set it all up. And if anyone wants to run it, it doesn't have to involve me. It can you can do it all amongst yourselves. So in the new year, let's make the.
Oh no, I was going to say, come on, Elfbait, join in.
Join in what? The game?
Yeah.
No.
If you don't mind waking up early.
Yeah. No. I mean, I already have to. I mean, it's so weird working on a West Coast schedule, living in the Midwest.
Yeah,
because
you got to think you'd have to be up about 7 a.m. to play in that, wouldn't you?
8 a.m. Central for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not too early, to be honest. I mean, I'm up for work that early. But yeah, I mean, maybe one of these days. I'm not a great player. I got to be honest. I'm looking forward to getting into my brother's game because I don't get to play that often. But I am my own worst enemy when it comes to my fun as a player, because I'm constantly as a player evaluating the GM's moves and not enjoying playing. You know, because I'm forever referencing the DM side of the screen. But,
yes, you're sat there judging.
Not judging, evaluating. Like,
It's the same thing.
No, because I'm not really making any judgments on the DM or the GM. I'm just kind of like going, okay, and he's doing it because of this, and this is the thing. I'm like. It's like going to a magic show and constantly focusing on how's he doing that instead of just enjoying the magic show. You know?
Well, see, Grumpy Old Slan, Gingerbeard, and ye old Geek all speak French, and I don't speak a lick of it. So they really play into that. And like,
yeah, I'm gone then too. So
Oh,
I'm American. We don't have to speak more than one language. No. Not proud
Speak
of
American, damn it.
Nothing
American.
I'm proud of. I've tried to learn German and Japanese, and I can not starve, and I can find a bathroom and I can buy stuff in both languages.
well, German I was okay with, but they all spoke English, to be fair, when I lived there. but
I can
no,
just
Sean,
about get about. I can just about say the cat is sat in the car and things like that in German. Is that coming useful?
you know what? Point
Kitty in Sprechen der Car.
but see, Sean over here. I don't know can you make that game?
What day is it?
January 7th.
7th. I don't think so. I have to confirm because we're my games either play Saturdays or Sundays, and so we're doing rearranging. Maybe.
I just wasn't sure if you were free on that one, or you're like
I might be.
okay.
I'll know in a week or so once I
Yeah.
get everybody's schedules lined up. Everybody's just quietly nodding now.
Anyhow, I think it's time to draw this to a close and switch my light out and retire to my my warm bed for the night. Because as always, Thursday morning, I have to be at work. So I'm going to say thank you, Elfbait. Just taking a bite of something.
Sure, you do it right. Or you start with me, Rez, and take a bite of homemade shortbread.
You couldn't wait two minutes for the thing to end.
No, the shortbread is that good.
Thank you, Sean, otherwise known as Major's Musings.
Thank you. It's been fun.
And thank you, Omanal. And as always, say thank you to those who have departed. DK was with us near the start, and Sachius joined us for the main body in the middle. It's been a good discussion as ever. Thank you to everyone in chat. There's been some lively chat tonight, but there's been some constructive chat as well. And if I'm not very good at dragging your comment up, and you want to. Don't feel bad about repeating yourself if you really want your comment brought up on screen and discussed, because I'm not very good at following chat and flagging up comments. So just say, "Oi, talk about this," and I'll try and come to it. But thank you everyone for taking part in the discussion, and I don't know if I'm going to be streaming on Friday or not yet. I will create it. It all depends. It's my brother's birthday next Wednesday. Don't know what we're doing, so I might not be streaming next Wednesday. It's all up in the air. I might be going to a gig this Friday. Nothing's confirmed, but I'll create something if I'm free. So on that note, I'm going to end it for tonight. Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.
All right, good night.